Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the May 1st, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. Elaine, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Badger?
Here.
Mr. Halter?
Here.
Mr. Prahl?
Here.
Mr. Volnick? Mayor Riggle?
Here.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Here.
Chairman Simpson?
Is there a motion to excuse Commissioner Volnick?
Motion to excuse Mr. Volnick and Mr. Simpson.
Second.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes. Yeah. Item 2 on the agenda, approval of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on April 3rd, 2019, as recorded and transcribed.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes. Moving to regular business, could the clerk please read item A?
Item A, Meeker's Venue. Case 1, 2019-0648, a request by John and Tess Meeker for approval of a rezoning amendment from R4 Medium Density Residential District to R4 PMU, Medium Density Residential with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and extend the current PMU at 377 East William Street to 385 East William Street for Meeker's Venue on approximately 0.477 acres and located at 385 East William Street. Case 2, 2019-0649, a request by John and Tess Meeker for approval of a conditional use permit allowing the placement of a PMU, planned mixed-use overlay district, to be established for Meeker's Venue on approximately 0.477 acres and located at 385 East William Street. Case 3, 2019-0650, request by John and Tess Meeker for approval of a final development plan for Meeker's Venue on approximately 0.477 acres zoned R4 PMU, medium density residential with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located at 385 East William Street.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just one note this evening, and for all the applicants in the audience and the citizens here, we only have 5 members of the commission. Normally we have 7. It requires 4 affirmative votes for an item to move on with a recommendation of approval to City Council, and so we normally just like to tell you that when we're down a few commissioners and remind the commission that if you can, either take a straw vote or make your intentions known so that applicants can decide to table their case until there's a full commission should they choose to do that. With that, I'm going to present this case very quickly. We have a lot of cases on the agenda. I think this one is fairly straightforward. In essence, there was a church here for a long, long time that held events and weddings and all kinds of things and had offices, Bible study, etc. The overall goal in this case is for John and Tess Meeker to essentially do all of that only as a commercial business. In order to do that, the property is zoned commercial at this time and would need to be rezoned, and I'll walk you through that really quickly. So the property is at the point, basically the confluence of Central Avenue and William Street. It's about a half an acre, a little less than a half an acre large. You can see the blue outline with the 60 in it. That is an existing planned mixed-use overlay that council approved several years ago for the Foreman building, which is a mixed-use building and has its own zoning text. In discussing this case with the Meekers and Foremans, what we recommended that they do, rather than have 2 small planned mixed-use developments, simply have 1 planned mixed-use development with 2 sub-areas. So sub-area A in your text is exactly what it was when Foreman got approved, so none of that is changing. Sub-area B is really the subject of this case and is the church or the Meekers property at this point. You can also see there that it's zoned residential. Currently, we have a lot of churches zoned that. This is a comprehensive land use plan. It does call for institutional use. Again, we don't think a change to the comprehensive plan is necessarily warranted. In this case, we're putting a mixed-use overlay over top of it. And again, the only difference here really is going from a church nonprofit use to a commercial use. Here's the site and aerial photograph, should we need to refer to it. You can see Foley Street on the west side of the property. There are some pre-existing conditions here, such as the fact that some of the parking hangs into Foley Street. We knew that during the Foreman rezoning as well. The city engineer is aware of that, and we'll come up with an agreement to allow that to continue, as you see in your staff report. There are 50 spaces available on this site, and one of the things we asked the makers to do is attempt to gain other control, at least, of other parking for this venue, even though the church has used it this way successfully for years. So they approached ODOT. That's the natural partner here with a big parking lot and weddings on the weekends, and ODOT generally not utilizing that lot on the weekends, and that proved unsuccessful to get a formal agreement in that regard. They have an agreement with the Foremans to share the parking, but obviously they don't have a whole lot there, so they kind of share parking back and forth and the refuse service back and forth. But Tess did a great job, I think, and she went out to the Delaware City Schools and secured an agreement to provide parking at Conger School. So that would be 46 spaces there, and that was included in your packet as well. So that far and away exceeds the required parking for any kind of venue. If this was new at a commercial site, we applied the most stringent parking that we could in our staff report, and they're still exceeding that. So she can explain a little bit how she might manage that, but I give her credit for obtaining that, and I thank her for doing that. I know that's not easy to do. So here you have sub-area A, the former property. Sub-area B is the Meeker property. The proposed site plan remains exactly as you see it today, with the addition of a privacy fence to the east, 6-foot privacy fence to the east, just to provide an outdoor area, as well with some barrier or some fence between these active roadways and in that outdoor area. Obviously, the site is kind of what it is at this point. Staff recommends approval of these cases as submitted with 6 conditions that are included in your staff report. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, David. Any questions from the commission?
Did you discuss the hours of operation with the Meekers?
We did discuss that with them in general. For the most part, they're looking at weekends. However, we didn't feel that it was necessarily appropriate to include a condition to preclude other days of the week, or even necessarily later hours, given the fact that the church ran all kinds of hours with all kinds of activities. You're between Central and William Street here, literally, and a point project to come by the city, hopefully. We all hope. And so at staff level, we didn't feel like an additional condition in that regard was necessary at this time.
Anyone else? Would the applicant like to come forward? Welcome. If you could state your name and your address for the record, please.
Tess Meeker, 6368 Worthington Road, Westerville, Ohio.
John Meeker, same address, 6368 Worthington Road, Westerville, Ohio.
Thank you. Well, is there anything you'd like to add to staff's presentation this evening?
Do you have any questions? Along with what you have received, we also had a letter for you guys in regards to just a little bit of what we're about. I'd like to read that. There's some things maybe in there that you don't have. So we have a dream of using the old church at the Point, from what I hear how it's called, located at 385 East William Street. as a venue for local community weddings, anniversary parties, birthday parties, graduation, religious celebrations, community meetings, and other events. We like to offer a different experience by having wedding couples and other big venues take their time and truly enjoy the whole process of the day of their celebration. We would like to offer the venue to be rented primarily for 2 days for a wedding or big event, to be able to decorate on Friday and then celebrate on Saturday. We also don't have any plans to do catering or beverage services, but would like to provide couples with a recommended vendors list of local businesses. And now we're also allowing the parties to provide for themselves. We also hope the community will be using the venue on a regular basis for smaller meetings or parties or celebrations, as well as office spaces maybe for counseling, Bible studies, and nonprofits. We anticipate these being held during the weekdays and evenings. We'll be working with the Conjure Elementary School and or other establishments that will allow us to use their parking lot for additional parking when required. The plan for the venue is to be used residential and commercial use. The residential part will be for a single family, as we intend to be a mom and pop business. We currently live in Delaware County, but would like to maintain our current home until our children have graduated from Westerville Central High School in 2021. I, Tess Meeker, and my husband, John Meeker, we will be the owners. I have 6 years' experience in conducting weddings as a wedding coordinator and a venue administrator. I have been providing high-quality service and customer satisfaction. Vendors hired to service the weddings are always complimentary of my abilities to go above and beyond. Wycliffe C. Meeker was John's great-great-grandfather, who died in Delaware County on November 26, 1884. He was buried in the Liberty Cemetery on Home Road. The Meekers have a long history of residing in Delaware County, and would be a privilege to be able to serve the community by running a family-owned venue. We are certain this type of use for the old church at the Point will become an income-producing facility for the city while maintaining the site's historical value. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank
Tess and
you.
John, I apologize, Commissioner, she hit on it. I failed to mention that part of the mixed use here is a single-family owner-occupied unit as well that they could put within church, a mom and pop business, as she described.
Jim?
Can I point out a small correction to staff recommendation 6? The sidewalk should say on East Central Avenue shall not be required to be extended. So if that needs to be corrected, I just want to point that out. There already is sidewalk along the full frontage of East Williams.
Any other questions or
Could
comments?
have pointed that out Friday, could Yes, it was intended to be central.
No?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time, I'll bring it back to the commission. What's the wish of the commission? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward and speak on this case? Seeing none, bring it back to the commission.
A motion to approve 2019-0648 rezoning with staff recommendations.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Kroll?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes.
Make a motion to approve 2019-0649 conditional use permit.
Second.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Kroll?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes.
And I'll make a motion to approve 2019-0650 final development plan with all staff recommendations.
Second.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Kroll?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes. Congratulations. Now, this will go before council. Is there a date scheduled for that?
May 13th is the first reading.
Huh?
Yeah.
Moving on to item B, the agenda. The clerk please read the case into the record.
Item B, Communities at Glen Ross, Section 13, Case 1, 2019-0651. A request by Pulte Homes of Ohio for approval of a final development plan for Communities of Glen Ross, Section 13, containing 44 single-family lots on approximately 21.436 acres zoned R2 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on East Wind Road, Silver Branch Drive, Stone Quarry Drive, and Harvest Moon Road. Case 2, 2019-0653, request by Pulte Homes of Ohio for approval of a final subdivision plat for Communities of Glen Ross, Section 13, containing 44 single-family lots on approximately 21.436 acres zoned R2 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on East Wind Road, Silver Branch Drive, Stone Quarry Drive, and Harvest Moon Road.
All right, I'll try to keep it quick too. As Lane said, the property is located south of Cheshire Road, west of Winterbourne Drive, with the western edge of this property directly adjacent to Glen Ross Golf Course. The site, as you can see here, is zoned R2 PMU, as are the properties to the northeast and south and to the northwest, with the property to the southwest being Ohio Health's property, which is zoned POI PMU. This property has a long history dating back to 2006. Most recently, Planning Commission and City Council approved sections 11 and 12 to the north in 2017, and then section 15 in 2018. As you can see here, the yellow indicates the sections that have already been approved, and the green is the currently proposed section 13. Here's a more colorful site plan. The submitted landscaping plan has 94 trees being removed, with 71 trees being planted. This does result in a difference of a little over 1,700 caliper inches that will need to be replaced. The applicant has indicated that they would like to plant this difference throughout the rest of the development, and staff will work closely with them to ensure that they meet compliance with the development text. And if they can't, meet that number of caliper inches, then there'd be a fee in lieu they would have to pay. In addition, along the western boundary here, there's an existing tree line that's going to be removed due to some grading issues, and per the development text, that'll need to be replaced. This section also contains a little over 4.3 acres of reserve area, as you can see here. That'll contain landscaping, which will include a lot of these trees being planted. It'll contain a walking path that'll connect section 13 up to 11 and 12, and then provide a location for the following section 14 to continue that walking path. This reserve area will also contain the location for a potential tot lot should the HOA desire one. Here's the plat. Per the development text, section 13 will mirror the standards of the houses in the golf club at Glen Ross, with lots that'll have a minimum of 80 feet of width and 130 feet of depth. The minimum house size will be 2,000 square feet, and the elevations on all sides will be required to be 100% natural materials. Front yard setback of 25 feet, side yard of 10, and a rear yard setback of 30 feet. As you can see here with the roads, East Wind Road extends west from Winterbourne through section 13. It'll connect with Silver Branch Drive here, and this is going to create a northern half of a loop that'll continue down into section 14. And then off Silver Branch Drive here, you got Stone Quarry Drive that'll connect up to sections 11 and 12. Staff recommends approval of the request for a final development plan and subdivision plat for Glen Ross Section 13 as it follows the approved development text. There are 12 recommended conditions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody on the commission have a question or comment?
I know this is section 13, but it looks like in section 15 that there's a house being built right now. Is that a model home? That would be closest to Cheshire on the northeast corner.
Back up here.
Is that a model for the 15 going out of order in the phasing?
I think that might be, they had a out under contract there. So, I mean, they don't have to go in phasing order
Right.
necessarily, but they are into that phase for sure. And we allowed them to do basically an early start for several lots, working closely with the fire department and the engineering department to make sure that we can get access in there and they complete their required improvements.
And in what section would we see Winterbourne finished? All the way to the southern is,
That requires.
that's not part of 13, correct? Or that's not part of,
I think
Yeah.
it's section 22.
Winterbourne along this part of
Right.
13, but you'll have
and then it
more.
stops.
Yeah, you'll have section 14, 22, and 18.
Would we require at 14 to have that Winterbourne finished?
Really depends which section commissioner they do first, 14 or 22. Either one of them requires that
Okay.
extension of Winterbourne. You could argue to get into 14, they don't have to do it all the way to the property line, so they could wait until 22. At the rate they're churning through product, though, it's going to be sooner rather than later.
Mhm. And so one of the mentioning in the staff recommendations on the plat was calming measures. Do you have an idea what type of calming measures? We're just talking,
Yeah, we've proposed and spoken with the developer a couple different times about traffic calming measures on that longer portion of Winterbourne being constructed in this phase. And what we anticipate right now is that there'll be median islands between the two intersecting roads. So I believe the median islands are like 2 islands and plus or minus 400 feet of length.
okay,
For 800 or so feet total with a break in the middle. And so that median island would be of a width that would allow either side to have a full 12-foot wide travel lane. And so, not having an extra 8 feet kind of provides some traffic calming effectiveness.
Okay.
We realize there's no parking on either side of the road, so we can utilize that space to do that. The other sort of spin-off advantage of that is that it's 8 feet less pavement that the city has to maintain. So that is something we've spoken with them about as a result of their first engineering submittal and awaiting a final submittal.
So the document that was laying on our desk tonight is different than the one that was in our package. So there's a few things that was overlooked in the package. Is that what happened, or what's?
There was a scanning error in the one page 3, I believe. Did not scan. It probably got stuck.
Lighting sign, okay.
Yeah. It's in my packet, it was just out of order.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
It's somewhere there.
Yeah, so page 3 was in there. For mine.
Oh, yes.
Well, now you have one in order. And I apologize for that.
That's okay. I'm just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything.
So this, is this the city's first kind of stepping into traffic calming devices?
It's not quite, I should say. We are starting to try to implement them more frequently, but we have some measure of traffic calming on the new section of Boulder Drive that just recently was accepted east of Houck. Previous to that, there's been other locations where the city has done some retrofits. I can't think of the road name up there off of Lexington, where some striping was used to do some traffic calming. That was actually successful. And so this is not the very first, but kind of on the beginning of trying to implement it as much as we can on collector and more higher traveled roadways, that, especially ones that don't have parking.
But we're gonna try to stay away from the bumps?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
That's it.
Thank you. The applicant is here. Would they like to come forward and address the commission? Could you please state your name and address, please?
Bradley Holland, 5500 New Albany Road, Columbus, Ohio, 43054. My name is, I am a representative of Pulte Home, representing Pulte Homes, and I'm the engineer for the project. I don't have any presentation or anything to add to the presentation this evening. I'm just here to answer any questions you may have.
Just generally, not trying to hold you down to anything, but do you think you would go to section 14 next, or?
That is,
Or back into-
I'd love to be able to answer that question, but as many times as I thought we were going into the next section of this development, we've been U-turning and going to another direction. It's all product-based, so I'd love to give you an answer on that, but I cannot do that.
It's just the, obviously, the continuation of Winterbourne, or finishing off Winterbourne.
Absolutely.
As we'll probably see coming up at the end of the, one of these other plans.
Yeah. Any questions or concerns that Pulte might have with the staff's recommendations that you're aware of? Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward and discuss this case? Seeing none, it's turn it back to the commission. What's the wish of the commission?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve 2019-0651 final development plan with all staff recommendations.
Second?
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansouri?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve 2019-0653 final subdivision plat with all staff recommendations.
Second?
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansouri?
Yes. Thank you. Congratulations. Moving on to item 3, please. Would the clerk read that case into the record?
Item C, Belmont Place, Section 6 and 7, Case 1, 2019-0655. A request by Glen Road Capital LLC for approval of a final development plan for Belmont Place, Section 6, containing 48 single-family lots on approximately 18.48 acres zoned B3, R6, and A1 PMU, Community Business District, Multifamily Business District, and Agricultural District with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on Crownover Way, LaChance Lane, McNamara Loop, and Brett's Lane. Case 2, 2019-0656, a request by Glen Road Capital LLC for approval of a final subdivision plat for Belmont Place, Section 6, containing 48 single-family lots on approximately 18.48 acres, zoned B3, R6, and A1 PMU, Community Business District, Multifamily Business District, and Agricultural District with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on Crownover Way, LaChance Lane, McNamara Loop, and Brett's Lane. Case 3, 2019-0659, a request by Glen Road Capital LLC for approval of a final development plan for Belmont Place, Section 7, containing 53 single-family lots on approximately 20.46 acres, zoned B3, R6, and A1 PMU, Community Business District, Multifamily Business District, and Agricultural District with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on McNamara Loop, Brett's Lane, and Houghton Lane. Case 4, 2019-0660, a request by Glen Road Capital LLC for approval of a final subdivision plat for Belmont Place, Section 7, containing 53 single-family lots on approximately 20.46 acres, Zone B3, R6, and A1 PMU, Community Business District, Multifamily Business District, and Agricultural District with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on McNamara Loop, Brett's Lane, and Houghton Lane.
Thank you. That was a lot, wasn't it?
See that look she gave you?
She did.
And you didn't even write it. Dave?
Get some water?
Okay, this subject site, section 6 and 7 are located just east of sections 1 through 5 of Belmont Place on Peach Blow Road, north side of Peach Blow. There's a lot of history here, but the recent history is in November of last year, Planning Commission approved a development text amendment, preliminary development plan, and preliminary subdivision plat that allowed the single-family detached houses on this site. It's a pretty, the arrow indicates that it's a vacant site, so there's one building on the southern portion of the site. This is what was approved in here, plus 5 outlots along Peach Blow Road, or Glen Parkway. Those are not part of this approval. Engineering is currently reviewing the final engineering plans for this, for these 2 plats. Section 6 is the northern portion of the plat. Access would be from Glen Parkway, and it would loop south into Section 7. They're also in this, they are building the, there's a private street, which would be the rear of the 4 commercial outlots. They're going to construct that in this portion also of the development. Section 7, which is just south of 6, you'd access that from Peach Blow Road into this section, and again, that would loop into Section 6 to the north of the site. Section 6 would have 48 single-family lots on it. There would be 2 retention ponds on the northern portion of the site, and the entrance sign would be in this area next to the retention pond. Section 7 to the south would be 53 lots, excuse me, in a large about a 6.5 acre reserve area, which would have the bike path through there that would extend west, and also there'd be a fit course in this area also, I think 10 stations, I believe. And also it would be a dual purpose. There would be a 4 to 6 foot high mound in this area buffering the single family houses from the future commercial outlots in that area. Landscaping, you'd have street trees throughout the site, and also in reserve areas. You can see they're landscaping that fairly heavily also. From a tree removal perspective, there are no trees would be removed. They're actually saving, I believe, 14 trees in Section 6 and 13 trees in Section 3 or 7. This is the open space and connectivity plan. There would be a bike path that would extend from Glen Parkway south through the reserve area, and then would extend east through the reserve area, and ultimately connect with the existing bike path on Peach Blow Road in front of Sections 1 and 5 of the subject development. Lighting plan would need to be submitted to be approved by the chief building official. A couple other conditions that are required with this. There are 2 houses on their property that's in Outlot 5, I believe. Before staff would approve any permits in Section 6 or 7 or any of the commercial outlots, those 2 houses need to be demolished, and it's on the subject owner's property. And also in an agreement, in a pre-annexation agreement, there was a, in the sale of this lot to the applicant, there was almost $173,000 of fees required. That would also need to be submitted to the city before any construction of any single-family homes in either section. Staff recommends approval of the final development plan and final subdivision plat of Section 6 with 15 conditions, and the final plan and plat of Section 7 with 13 conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Lance. Any questions for staff?
No, just for the
Applicant. Would the applicant like to come forward at this time? Please state your name and address. Welcome back.
Thank you. Kevin McCauley, 6689 Double Center Drive, Pelham, Ohio, 43017, representing Indiana. Joel.
Joel Trawortha, Ryan Holmes, 8351 North High Street, 43235.
Before we get started, any concerns or questions you have with staff's recommendations?
No, we're in line with all of them. And I know just so we know, update everybody beforehand, last time we were in front of you, the question did come up, when are we gonna tear down the houses? So I actually had contractors on site and, in my error and omission, I failed to get the gas lines. I had the meter pulled, but failed to get the gas lines removed, so I'm waiting on Columbia Gas, to come back out and do that. And Columbia Gas is not the swiftest, but they should be there within the next few weeks, and those houses are going to be gone, sort of in by the end of the month. So we know that it's still no problem in meeting Davis deadlines before permits, but I promised you all that they would be down, and we are on it. My error, so.
Always a snag or two.
Yeah, sorry about that. So other than that, no change in the plans from when we were here the last time, but happy to try to answer any questions that you guys have and see where we go.
Great, thank you.
That was my question.
Oh, great minds think alike.
There you go.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Well, thanks a lot.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
you
you.
coming back up and
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
that clarification for us.
No
Thank
problem.
you. This time, I'd like to invite anyone from the public to come forward and if they have a comment or question. Seeing none, I'd turn it back to the commission. What's the wish of the commission?
I'll move to approve item 2019-655, final development plan for section 6 with all staff recommendations.
Second.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
Okay, I'll move item 2019-0656, final subdivision plat for section 6 with all staff recommendations.
Second.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
I'll move item 2019-0659, final development plan for Belmont Place section 7 with all staff recommendations.
Second.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes.
And finally, I'll recommend item 2019-0660, final subdivision plat for section 7 with all recommendations.
Second.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansoris?
Yes. Thanks, congratulations, yeah. Right, moving right along. Clerk, please read item D into the record.
Item D, case 2019-0655, a request by Redwood Living for approval of a final development plan for the Preserve at Quail Pass Phase 3 for 100 single-family apartment units on approximately 19.78 acres zoned M1 PMU, light manufacturing with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located south of Mill Run Crossing and just west of Glen Road.
Who will be presenting this?
I will, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is final development plan for the last phase of the Quail Pass Apartments. It is the southernmost piece of their development site and does front on Glen Road. As planned in the zoning text and the preliminary plan, it will have a driveway off of Glen Road as well and an emergency-only access point in addition to that. So there's a lot of room between the north and the south pieces here. The property is zoned with a planned mixed-use overlay that includes our wetland park and the Glenmore Common Shopping Center to make a full mixed-use development site. Tabletop farmland, as you can see today. There is a ditch approximately on the northern red line here known as the Moody Ditch. We've encountered this in the preliminary plan and the text. They do have to set back from that ditch and maintain the ditch, which they're accomplishing in this plan. Two of the roadways will go over the ditch to provide connectivity for private streets in this development. There's a plan that was included in your packet. There are two retention ponds. A couple things to note here, and I wish I kind of had the more specific pointer, but there's a sidewalk pathway between those two roads. And then one of our conditions is that that path continue on to this point in our wetland park and hook into the back of our wetland park. They do have a path connection up here as well, but that would provide connectivity for all of the development. That was something we talked about early on in the process, and my understanding is the applicant's willing to do that. Another thing to point out here is that along Glen Road, there is a healthy and significant setback included. Part of that setback, however, is encumbered by several easements, large easements, including gas easements and other things. And so it may not be, you'll notice a condition for a 6-foot-high mound and landscaping. It may not be possible, easement holders may not allow us to put a 6-foot-high mound there. In that case, I've indicated to the applicant that hopefully they can secure that from those easement holders. If they can't, then we will work with them to enhance the landscaping along the corridor there as much as possible, and possibly even change the unit types so that they face more inward rather than more outward for the future residents. Obviously, Glen Road in this area long-term is planned to be widened and be an arterial. There is a large setback, however, here. And I think with the landscaping and the unit types and the use that they've proposed here, that'll work well. We do have kind of a model for this up along Mill Run Crossing. That setback wasn't as large as we had hoped. They actually Redwood changed their unit type for a Delaware unit type, I guess, that they're building elsewhere now. They kind of had, everybody comes in their garage, the back of the house, but those have fronts on the Mill Run with a lot of landscaping and actually a little porch area on the technical front of their home up there. So that could be an option here as well. Either way, we know we have options with Redwood. They've been good to work with. We do have a planned mixed use overlay here, and I feel confident we can work with them. Still hopeful that the easement holders will let us just do the mound and the landscaping, and we're done. I do include landscape plans here in the presentation. I'm not going to go over those because you can't see them here anyhow. They were in your packet, and happy to answer any questions you might have. But continuation of the first two phases to continue sort of the streetscape pattern, even though these are private streets, with some trees and some coach lights as well. So I'll buzz through those. Again, the elevations are virtually impossible to see even on a 90-inch television screen. They were included in your packets, and they continue the pattern of design and development that you see out there that has been very well received in the marketplace, and I think looks good. As I said, they've invented at least a couple of designs that I would call the Delaware designs at this point. I don't know what they call them, but they should call them that. So I'll buzz through the elevations. They're here if we want to talk about them. Staff does recommend approval of this final development plan with 13 conditions, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments for staff?
Dave, the Delaware North New Community Authority.
Yes.
In this area, how far south along Glen Road does that community authority?
How far south does the North Community Authority go?
How far south on Glen Road is the north?
The railroad tracks is where it's being
track.
contemplated. I think one of the things we've talked about is if and when other pieces develop, that we would do, our best to bring those into the community authority as well. Obviously, a lot of those pieces are already in the city and already zoned, and so the leverage points for us are not as great as an annexation or rezoning or something of that nature.
Just trying to get an idea or just more of a visual on how long for the Glen Road improvements themselves down to the railroad track.
And I believe the North NCA only covers the residential portion, if I recall correctly, and that's like the South NCA.
Yeah, I don't
Don't hold me to that, but I believe that's.
Yeah, I think the South has the commercial part.
The South, the NCA only covers the residential, I can tell you that for sure. And there are lots of different kind of TIF districts down the south as well. There's actually a TIF here, in addition to
Did you say that walking path that you're recommending would connect to the wetland park?
Yes, it would
Or
connect into the back. There's kind of two tracks back here. You can kind of cut the corner if you want to over the bridge,
Yeah.
or take the full loop, and it would connect back in right here. We do have to work out some of those details with our Parks and Rec department, but it's relatively flat, and we've always, well, at least from the beginning, from the preliminary, we've talked about having that pathway connect into the back.
So you've got one driveway, you're saying you've got only one driveway coming out, is it the
Correct.
northern one, and the other one's just for emergency?
That's correct.
So we've got 100 more houses, virtually at least 200 more cars, dumping them all on that, or else going back through this other subdivision to get to Mill Run.
Yeah. Now, Mill Run and Glen Road are pretty major roads.
No.
And Jonathan can speak to that, but the engineers have reviewed this for quite some time, and that's what they feel is adequate. And I believe there's a traffic study performed in support of that as well.
That's correct. I think the traffic study was before the first phase with the overall development, but my understanding is that going back to that time, only one access point to Glen Road was always anticipated for this phase.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for staff?
Just generally, have you heard anything about, the Glen Parkway at 3637 having the light put in?
We don't anticipate the light going in the short-term future. By all means, when Glen Parkway is connected all the way to the south, I would imagine it would definitely be warranted at that time. The other possibility would be if, for some reason, Glen were to extend to the north before that time, then that would probably warrant that signal being installed at that time as well. So, no plans, it's not programmed in city capital plans to go in this year or anything like that.
Okay.
Do you have a concern? Something?
I don't like one exit coming out. There's a fire here, people can't get out, and I don't like it, I never have, I never will. I believe there should be another entrance out. In this whole subdivision, we've got 3. We've got one at the roundabout, one here, and one down here, and that's it. And I don't like it, so that's just my opinion.
I think, it's a good point you raised there. I would say that for that leg of the roadway there, I don't know if it has a name, but the one that goes south and sort of dead ends and loops around to the emergency access only point, you have, what is that, Dave? 4 buildings,
Yeah.
total amount of units would be,
Yeah.
what, 6 units a building or 4 units a building?
Sure, it's 4 to
So-
7 per building. But
So you're talking about a relatively small portion of the overall development that does have a dead end. And the fire department, of course, required the emergency access. At one time, it was only going to be a T turnaround, and we sort of worked with the applicant, myself, and the fire department, and said we would like that to loop around the Glen Road to make a hard connection. There will be collapsible bollards there to prevent it from being used. We didn't really want a main traffic access point quite as close to the railroad. We'd rather that intersection be up there toward the north end. There was also some discussion, I believe, in the preliminary stages of this development with the Glens for that access point not to be immediately adjacent to their residence and I believe business is located there. So they have a couple driveways off of Glen Road to the east that we were trying to, shift the access point north as far as we could from their property so they don't have, entering vehicles in front of their house. And so that's sort of some of the thinking that went into that location.
Is this not the property that we bought?
To the east?
Mm-hmm.
No, no.
Okay.
no,
That is down, I think what you're referring to is one of the phases of Glen Parkway to the south,
Okay.
down there.
It just, to be very clear, we have 300 some odd units here, but we do have 3 dedicated intersection points off roadways. 2 is what the requirement is at a minimum. Plus we have the additional emergency access only, so they do comply with.
And from a
regulation.
strict traffic volume standpoint, we have no concerns about capacity of that one road off of Glen to handle that. I believe that most of the traffic from phase 1 and 2 will continue to use the 2 points on Mill Run Crossing to get out. And then, portions of phase 3 may very well use that area too, going north to Mill Run, and the remainder would use that single access point at Glen. But when you look at the traffic volumes and peak hour volumes, there's no concern about a turn lane on Glen or anything like that. So I'm personally comfortable with the one access point.
Okay, thank you.
So, David, you were mentioning earlier, since we don't have a full complement of commissioners here, would this be an appropriate time to consider whether or not we should possibly take a straw vote to determine whether or not we go forward?
Yes, you certainly can do that, Commissioner. I'd just know for the record, it's the final phase and the final development plan, which is administrative act, and so, at least in our opinion, we don't see a reason not to approve this as submitted. But yes, if there's problems or questions, I think you should put that on the table and allow the applicant to address those if you have them.
There are no other questions for staff. I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward. Welcome. Could you please state your name and address for the record, please?
Patricia Ricosi, 7510 East Pleasant Valley Road, Independence, Ohio.
And Todd Foley with Pod Design, 100 Northwoods Boulevard, Columbus, Ohio, 43235.
So first of all, the recommendations, do you have any questions or concerns about the staff's recommendations?
No, we've reviewed them all, had some follow-up discussions, and we're in agreement with all 13 conditions as noted.
I will tell you that Phase 1 and Phase 2 has been very successful for us, and we're very much looking forward to moving into Phase 3.
One thing I can add to condition number 8, we have begun trying to get in contact with the various utilities easements that exist out there. Our engineer, Chad Buckley, just informed us beforehand that there's an electric easement. They don't have an issue with us mounting over top of it. There are several gas easements that are substantial that we're looking through right now. So we don't have any report on those, but we're happy to continue to work with staff. Those units that you see facing Glen Road right now, those are the front porch units, the Delaware unit. I'll tell John that. Those are the same units that we implemented in Phase 2 and are doing so across their portfolio. It really improves the front door experience to their product and their community from the street. So that's what you see represented there. And there's also some substantial landscaping that's there now that can definitely be improved upon if we cannot achieve mounding as well. We're happy to do so. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Staff recommendation number 13, talking about the school district.
Lucky number 13.
Yeah, I'm looking number 13. Is that Phase 1 and 2 are part of City of Delaware? Have you
So,
been able to
Commissioner,
move that portion of
it's
OLSD into?
actually a good chunk of Phase 3 is in Delaware as well. It's literally, I believe, and I think the line is pretty much continuation. It's all township and range line that continues right in here. So I believe those units, if this goes back to development agreements years and years and years, 10 plus years ago. They did have discussions with the school district a while ago, and there was no movement. But today is 10 plus years in advance. At least the Delaware district will have a new superintendent here, and I think it's in the Olentangy district actually has a new superintendent since those discussions happened, and so I included that condition. It's just a little goofy to have the entire division not in the same school district, and the line may actually technically go through some of the units.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they do, and I guess half your kid goes to one school and half your kid goes the other.
Depends on the bedroom.
Now they figure that out,
Right,
right?
choose which kid.
Yeah, they choose which part of the kid goes to which school. So we just ask them to do, we can't force them, because we can't force the schools to decide on that, but it just seems logical.
And to echo David's comments, that's been an ongoing discussion, and we know that's a goal from staff's perspective, and we're gonna continue to work on that, to kind of clear that up.
It hasn't been a burning thing, because we haven't been to
Right.
phase
Right.
3.
Correct. I was just gonna say that was part of why it hadn't been done to date, so.
That's all I have.
Anyone else have any questions? Sitting in the audience, you heard some of the concerns about the access to in and out, particularly for fire and safety. Is there anything you wanted to add or comment about that?
I think overall, from where we started with the preliminary development plan, to date, we've actually, the preliminary development plan only had one access point envisioned over there. Adding the second one there, we think is going to be more than adequate. The fact that we have 2 crossings that exist over the ditch helps internally as well, so that we can utilize the connection points on the north as well. So we're comfortable with that arrangement, and the prototypical resident from a traffic impact perspective is kind of more of a 10 and 2 type of resident. What I mean by that is lots of empty nesters, active seniors, things like that, that don't tend to do an 8 to 5 type of cycle. So the traffic gets distributed at a little bit different rate than a prototypical apartment community. So from a traffic perspective, we see a little more balance there, but we're very comfortable with the site as we have. And as part of our engineering review, we're working with the fire department to make sure that any turnarounds or access points and all that are per their standards, so.
Could I just ask you what the rental points are in these units? What do you rent them?
Well, they vary depending on if they're in unit or whether they're backing out, but 14 to 1600.
Yeah, and this community as a whole, I've been a part of this since the very beginning, working with Redwood. I mean, there are probably 15 to 20 different unit types, maybe even more. We have 5 different building configurations on the project. So there's a lot of variety of unit types. Some have 4-season porches on the end. Some have side load garages. So we've worked really hard with staff over the years, literally, to make sure there's variety and that it's not the same thing over and over. And so it's definitely been well received by them.
How have the number of units that you ultimately want to be able to offer changed since you first came to us?
As far as, well, I think there's been an evolution of the company, I should say, since 2013. I mean, it's they have gone from more of a standard product type to providing what I mentioned. I think we have 5 or 6 different building products on site. So each phase 2, we were able to bring a few more options on board. Phase 3, we have a few more from that perspective. So the momentum is kind of have built. They're all still centered around the core a design of an attached 2-car garage, a 2-bedroom and 2 full bath unit, and all have very comparable square footages as well. So private patios, and they have a full depth driveway, so every unit has 4 parking spaces. So the consistency of what they're offering as a rental product has been the same.
I've been working with Redwood for a number of years, and when we first started, we basically had one type of unit. And so over the years, as what's demanded is what we've been building. And like the sunrooms, like you said, the front porch units, which are doing very well. And initially our units were probably 1,000 square feet. Now we have some that are up to 1,600 square feet. But to Todd's point, they all have the same 2-car garage, 2 full baths. We still have the vaulted ceilings. We have upgraded to now we have slate floors, as well as stainless steel appliances and granite countertops. and we're very proud of our evolution.
Any other comments or questions from staff? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. At this time, I'd like to welcome anyone from the public that would like to come forward. Seeing none, turn it back to the commission. What's the wish of the commission?
I'll make a motion to approve 2019-0655 final development plan with all staff recommendations.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes. Clerk, moving on, clerk read item E into the record.
Item E, Winter Workplace, Case 1, 2019-0640, a request by Gordon LLC for approval of a rezoning amendment from A1 Agricultural District to R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district for Winterbrook Place containing 263 single-family lots on approximately 100.6 acres and located on the north side of Peach Blow Road, just east of the Belmont Place subdivision. Case 2, 2019-0641, a request by Gordon LLC for approval of a conditional use permit allowing the placement of PMU planned mixed-use overlay district to be established for Winterbrook Place containing 263 single-family lots on approximately 100.6 acres and located on the north side of Peach Blow Road, just east of the Belmont Place subdivision. In Case 3, 2019-0642, a request by Gordon LLC for approval of a preliminary development plan for Winterbrook Place containing 263 single-family lots on approximately 100.6 acres zoned R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located on the north side of Peach Blow Road just east of the Belmont Place subdivision.
Yeah, currently the subject site's located in the township and zoned FR1. However, they're in the process of annexing the site into the city, and upon annexation, it would be zoned A1 agricultural. So they're requesting the rezoning to R3 PMU to allow the mixture of uses at the site, on the site. From a comprehensive plan perspective, it's identified as low-density single-family per our plan, which includes densities from 2 units per acre to 3.25 units per acre. The subject development is at 2.61 units per acre. The site is relatively flat in farmland. And the owner's house is here. Obviously, that would be demolished in the site. It is adjacent to 2 subdivisions in the city. The community of Glen Ross sections 11 through 22 is located just north of the site, and Winterbourne Drive would be extended through the site. That development is at sections 11 through 22 is at 2.31 units per acre. To the west is Belmont Place sections 1 through 5 in this area, and most of that's built out as we speak, and that's at 2.75 units per acre. So the proposed development is between the developments to the north and west from a units per acre perspective. Also, there's a lot of development occurring in the township south of the site. This development here is the proposed Berlin Meadows development located just south of the development. Actually, they'd be sharing the same roundabout as the entrance point, and it's mostly single family. There would be a school in this area south of Peach Blow. However, the frontage of the site in this area is actually, there's going to be commercial planned in the township in that area. That rezoning, I believe, is going through the process in Berlin Township as we speak. Also, the Evans Farm development, which portion of it's currently under development, The northern finger of the development in this area, north of Peach Blow, is actually just east of the proposed site. So you have two subdivisions, one to the north. This is the proposed development. As indicated, it's 263 single-family lots on the site. The main access point would be at a roundabout, a proposed roundabout on Peach Blow Road at that location. From a roadway perspective, Winterbourne Drive would be extended north to the communities of Glen Ross. To the west, Instance Drive would be extended from Belmont Place, stubs from Belmont Place into the Ohio Health Panhandle lot. That'd be extended north, then east into the development. That'd be the emergency access point. Then obviously you'd have the access from the north once Winterbourne Drive is extended through the communities of Glen Ross. Then also you have a stub street west into the future Evans Farm development, as I spoke to earlier. So there's connectivity to the north, east, and west of this site for future development. The internal roads would be public roads, and they'd be looped, and you see some cul-de-sacs. They'd be your typical double-loaded streets that would have to meet our minimum street requirements per the city engineer. As I indicated, there'd be 263 single-family lots. 21 of the lots would be 80-foot wide lots. They're located in the beige. They're adjacent to the communities of Glen Ross. There'd be 80-foot lots to match adjacent to the 80-foot lots in the communities of Glen Ross. Also, there'd be 130 65-foot lots, and they're in the green. They'd be adjacent to the communities of Glen Ross where the 65-footers abut, and also to the west to Belmont Place where Belmont Place is 65-foot wide lots. Also, there are 112 52-foot lots, and they would be in the lighter green. They'd be east and west of Winterbourne Drive in the southeastern portion of the site, within the site itself. The setbacks for the front setbacks would be 25 foot for the entire development. The rear would be 30, and each the 52-foot lots would have 5-foot side yard setbacks. The 65s would have 6.5, and the 80-foot lots would have 7.5-foot side setbacks. The house sizes, the 80-foot lots would be a minimum 2,000 square feet, which are required in the communities of Glen Ross. The 65-foot lots would be a minimum 1,800 square feet, which is required in Glen Ross also in this area, and would be a little larger than the Belmont Place single-family house sizes. Also, the applicant is requesting 150-foot or 1,500 square foot house sizes for the 52-foot lots. Staff recommends that a one-story be 1,600 square feet and a two-story be 1,800 square feet to match the smallest lots in the community of Glen Ross for consistency perspective.
So we would note for you that the first houses being sold on the 50-foot wide lots in communities of Glen Ross are all in excess of 2,000 square feet. So it's a bigger house, it's a little bit bigger house than anticipated than the minimums, well appointed, and selling for between $300,000 and $400,000 in that development at this point in time.
Also, from a site plan perspective, there's two retention basins on the southeastern portion of the site, fronting Peach Blow Road. And there's a 150-foot wide overhead electric easement also. There's a detention pond fronting Peach Blow Road on the western portion of the site, and there's a fourth retention pond in the northwestern portion of the site. From an open space perspective, this is the open space plan for the subject development. A bike path will be required along Peach Blow Road that matches the existing bike path in front of Belmont Place. Also, Winterbourne Drive, there'd be a bike path required on both sides of the road, and that'd be similar to what's occurring in Glen Ross, communities of Glen Ross just north of that. So those should match, and also the mounding and landscaping in those areas should be consistent with the aforementioned streets and bike paths. From a parks perspective, there's about 27 acres of open space in the whole development. About just over 14 acres is actually active space. There's really 5 areas where they're identified as active open space. The first one is just west of the entrance. In this area, they're proposing a shelter, a bocce ball court, and a lake in this area. Just east of the entrance is a second open space. They have a walking path, and there's some retention ponds in this area and some open fields in this area. Just north of that is the third open space. It has a walking path through it and a sidewalk. Staff would recommend a tot lot in this area and be programmed a little more. The fourth open space would be actually between lots in the northeastern portion of the site, and it has a tot lot and a lake. And the fifth open space is in the northwestern portion of the site near the retention pond, and it has a walking path and a tot lot and lake through the site, through that open space. Staff would recommend that before final development plan and plat approval that those are programmed per staff requirements in our park department to ensure we get the appropriate amenities in each of the open spaces. From a tree, in this photo here shows a section of Winterbourne Drive and the mounding and landscaping along that to match what's north in the communities of Glen Ross. And also, these are some of the site details of the open spaces. You'd have the shelter and tot lot equipment, the bocce ball, and this actually shows the entrance signs into the development. From a tree preservation perspective, they're removing about 915 caliper inches of trees. However, they're preserving over 1,700. So there's a net 856 caliper inches tree positive for this site, which is unusual for what's shown. It's good. And most of the trees being preserved is just west of the entrance in this area and along the western portion of Winterbourne Drive, then on the north and eastern property lines. The staff recommends that those areas be put in a tree preservation easement to ensure that they are preserved in the future. From a phasing perspective, at this point it'd be developed in 7 phases. The first phase would be west of Winterbourne Drive along Peach Blow Road, and that would extend. 2 would be north and 3 would be on the west side, and they would develop to the north of that in the future. These are some of the examples of the house elevation. The 52-foot lots would require 40% open space, or 40% natural materials on the front elevation, I'm sorry. And we're also recommend that they be a minimum 1,600 square feet for single family and 18 for 2 family. I think these are similar to Glen Ross elevations. The 65-foot lots would also have 40-foot natural materials on the front elevation. These are some examples. And the 80-foot lots would require 100% natural materials on all elevations for the community of Glen Ross, similar to communities of Glen Ross.
Just a point on the smaller lots, Commissioners, communities of Glen Ross, 50-foot lots actually only require 25% natural materials, and so this is close to double that on these. And we felt that was appropriate to recommend to you and work with the developer in that regard, just because there's a little bit more of them relative to the overall development here, and to continue our upgrades.
In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the rezoning with 1 condition, approval of conditional use with no conditions, and approval of the preliminary development plan with 17 conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Lance.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I just note that obviously you've received at your desks at your stations tonight a letter from Stephen Elliott, who's the attorney for Mr. Gunling, Mr. and Mrs. Gunling, I believe, who are the 5-acre piece that basically isn't part of this development. My understanding is that the Gurdon sold the Gunlings this piece a while ago. It's a nice piece of property. There's a house on it, and the Gunlings have lived there for a while. Included in Mr. Elliott's letter are a number of objections to this development. Obviously, staff doesn't agree with the ones with respect to units and arrangement. We're recommending approval of these cases. But I think there are some reasonable points to be made with respect to enhancing the buffering along the western retention basin, for example, along making sure that we have signage on the bike path. This is going to be a gap in the bike path network that essentially Gunling's property is the gap at this point in time, and just making sure that people don't, as much as we can, just continue to walk across their property as well. So I think I appreciate that communication, and we have met with Mr. Elliott, Mr. Gunling, to try to understand, do you want a more buffered plan, or do you want a plan that, potentially puts utilities or roadways at your property lines if you're thinking about selling or something like that in the future? The word we got back was sort of the more buffered plan. I think that's consistent with the notes in Mr. Elliott's letter, and that's what the applicant submitted. The applicant and his team also do have the letter from Mr. Elliott as well, and I think they're ready to discuss some of those items this evening. So I just want to make those notes for everybody. So I appreciate the communication and the collaboration between both parties here. That's helpful for us to try to understand where everybody's coming from and where our recommendations may end up falling. Obviously, City Council will make the final decision for us all. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, David. Any questions for staff at this time?
So the county engineer has the roundabout. Who's got the rest of the Peach Blow improvements? Will that be on the developer going from Belmont east to the edge of the property line?
So a part of this development, to my knowledge, no improvements to Peach Blow Road are necessary, pending the outcome of the traffic study, which in the event that some sort of improvement to that section of Peach Blow was needed, the county would make that judgment. It is all their road from the tracks west to just a portion where Peach Blow curves up and connects to Glen. So as far as any decisions regarding Peach Blow, the ball is in the county's court, so to speak, pending the results of the traffic study. But to the best of my knowledge, the only thing that's being considered at this time is the fairly large intersection improvement at Winterborn.
Can you just briefly touch on the need for that basin in the southwest corner along that I believe it's Grundling property? Is there enough drainage on Belmont to take that up?
I have not personally reviewed the preliminary stormwater report. That it's not my project, so maybe the applicant's engineer could perhaps speak to that.
The two retention ponds in the north, in that south corner there, the grass between that is divided because of the overhead lines, so they did not, because of the open air space, they did not want water below that, is that correct?
Yeah, that's part of the overhead easement, the 150 feet. And they didn't want retention ponds underneath that, within that easement.
So instead, we're gonna put green space and play areas and, okay.
Pretty consistent with pretty much all of the development that has happened within the county. Try to utilize those spaces. A lot of times Old Tangy schools are underneath those power lines, but to utilize those spaces for at least open space.
If I look at that easement, I get it's not the power lines, it's the easement part, but you're looking at 2, possibly 3 lots that are in that easement. Have you talked with the developer? I'm not really comfortable having any lots within the easement. If you're gonna separate basins, I would think we would separate housing as well, to not have any housing within the easement as well. Have you had any discussions with
We did talk about keeping the housing, they do clip the,
Looks like two.
I think they're lots 84 and 85, if I could squint those numbers down a little bit. So that, I think that's a fair comment, and I don't think, I mean, where the lot is within the easement, I don't think the house, potential house footprint is within it for what it's worth.
I did note that the, talking about the tot lots to have quite a bit of amenities, so I appreciate that.
So one of the tot lots is here. Is this the other one? I gotta find that sheet again. Show me where the two tot lots are gonna be.
Here.
Okay.
Over here.
All right, so not underneath the overhead.
And again, this is zoning and preliminary, and so our
Mhm.
recommendation is
Yep.
to, this is fairly strong wording for us from staff to make sure that we have exceptional programming of these open space and park areas as final development plans and plats would come forward, the applicant's aware of that.
Any other comments or questions for staff?
My comments are the same as I've made many times. I just don't like the tot lots or the playgrounds right up against the retaining ponds. I think we're asking for problems sometime. I mean, it's always bothered me that we take and put, that water and kids together. And, I mean, I've seen it in other places. I know maybe there's not much we can do about it, but I've often wondered why in some cases we make them put a fence around a pond. In these cases, we don't make them put a fence around a pond and make access to the kids. I just don't think it's fallen on deaf ears so far. I don't think it's going to help this time either, but, at least if anything happened, I can always say, see, I told you so.
And you will.
I think it's a fair point,
I think it's a
Commissioner.
very good
We
point.
also see the water as, it does serve a stormwater utility function, but it is often considered an amenity in the subdivisions as well. And you see people walking around them and fishing in them occasionally. Sometimes they're supposed to fish, sometimes they're not allowed to fish in them, that sort of thing. But we do look at them as an amenity too. We have to have them regardless.
Yeah, I've seen them, I'm over there off Houck Road, big signs up, no swimming, no fishing, no this, no that, and
Yeah.
there they are there.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't recommend swimming.
I mean, they get close to that thing, if it's wet, there's usually a hill there. It just bothers me, that's all, it does.
And I sympathize with your point. I will say from a design standpoint of the stormwater retention basins, I'm not saying this would solve all the issues, but there is usually a safety bench. We call it a safety bench because it's, I believe, usually 8 feet out from the edge of the water. There is a fairly shallow portion before it drops off and gets deep. And that safety bench portion is usually a depth of water of, I think, about 2 feet. So the idea behind that is to hopefully, for these instances that you're referring to, hopefully prevent a tragedy.
People drown in bathtubs in less than 2 foot of water.
Yeah.
But I appreciate what you're saying, though. I mean, that's better than having to just drop off to 4 foot.
Right.
I agree with Mr. Halter on that, particularly when you've got, a half a dozen homes backing up into that corner, and even on the southeast corner. Not a huge fan of fencing, but I think it'd be a point where, possibly fencing along there, around both retentions on the northwest and on the southeast. Becomes a maintenance for the HOA, but I would agree, because what we're seeing at the Glen Ross is one of the approvals was a sledding hill, not that this one has it, but with enough speed, some people are getting very, very close on sledding hills, even to the into the drop area type of thing. with no fencing. So I would agree with your point, Jim, about something, whether it's fencing, whether it's a mounding portion or something to, to prevent or to try to stop people from utilizing the areas.
This time I'd like to invite the applicant and any support staff with them to come forward. Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. My name is Bob Gurdon. I'm with representing Gurdon LLC. My address is 10590 Wellington Boulevard, Powell, Ohio. So, wanted to kind of first introduce the team that we put together about 2 years ago when we started doing this, and certainly have had some issues trying to get utilities through Ohio Health, and spent 2 long years, and I'm certainly happy to be here in front of you today. Mike Shade, our attorney, also former city mayor. Jack Frickner is with Planned Communities. He's a consultant. Really was instrumental in putting Ohio Health together, negotiating that deal, and I don't think it would have happened if he wasn't on board. Todd Ferris is planning design, so he drew all the pictures and has a lot of input, knows a lot about zoning code, and really a great asset to have. And then Brian Burkhart with CEC, engineering and stormwater, utility assessment, so all of those things. I know Lance kind of hit on this, but this is our property here. I'll get up and kind of point it out. It's kind of an overview of, so we're right here, 100 acres. As he said, this is a different homeowner, then we own this piece here. Back here, this is obviously 23, Glen Parkway, Ohio Health. Pulte is back here. They were in front of you today. Stavrock, they just, I don't know if they got approved or not, they're in the final development plan. Metro owns a couple hundred acres right here. They're trying to get through Berlin, and Lance pointed out, and then Evans Farms owns this over here. So general area, as Lance pointed out, there's a lot of development going in the area. Here, there's a lot of mixed-use developments, especially with Pulte, and what Metro is trying to do is, as well as Evans, mixed use going on. So next is the comprehensive plan. So this is the city's comprehensive plan. This is us right here. As you can see, we're on the very southern edge of the city for annexation. Annexation, according to this, future corporate boundary is dotted line. It's Peach Blow Road and the railroad tracks. So I believe that the sanitary is to provide your system, utilities will be able to provide this area. So just to kind of reiterate, we're on the very southern edge, and we are low density 2.5 to 3.25. So that's what the city comprehensive plan states our density, where it should be in that range, and we're 2.61. So we're right in that range for the density. This is Pulte. I know Lance put this in. This is Winterborn. I'll just kind of touch on this a little bit. They have 50s here and 65s and 80s. So it's a mixed use plan. There's a lot of research we did, and a lot what we're hearing from the builders is that's the kind of developments with open space, walkability, really a trend that the planners are trying to do now, and we did some research, and I'll get into that in a minute as far as what we're trying to do. It's very prevalent throughout the whole area. Evans is, Metro. So when I started doing this, and I talked to Todd Ferris, and I talked to builders, and we did some research, and that's kind of the development pattern that's going on, and that's what the builders are looking for, and that's what is successful. So that's what we tried to do. Tried to do what people told us to do. So we're trying to create similar attributes that Pulte has that other developments are doing. This is Stavroff. They're to our west. This is Ensigns Lane, Ohio Health. It's where we're going to tie in, just a kind of overview of. Again, Lance had this up. This is Metros. So this is Peach Blow Road. Again, we're on the southern edge of the municipal boundary. So southernmost, commercial here, school. So that's why we placed those, maybe the smaller lots up against Peach Blow Road to have a good transition. They're planning on 55, 62s, and 66s. That's what they're proposing to Berlin Township to try to get approval with, along with the school and all this commercial aspect of it. Now this is an old a drawing. This has moved west a little bit, which benefits us. Jack will talk about that here in a minute, about the roundabout and aligning on Peach Blow Road and where the alignment was, and a little bit of a battle with Metro. Wanted it a little towards this way, but it's close to the railroad tracks and it's underneath the high tension lines. And if there was a signal there, which there won't be because it's a roundabout, they didn't want to have that signal there, so they pushed it. And we kind of aligned that roadway along our tree line. There's a tree line that kind of dissects two major portions. And we put that Winterbourne right along that tree line, so we preserve those trees, number one, and also it aligned up with the Pulte piece as well. So this next one is actually curved. This is Peach Blow. You can see they moved this intersection west, was around here. So this area is bigger, this area is a little bit smaller, and this is a little more dimension. So this is obviously with the roundabout drawn in it. This is Metro's illustrative. Again, they're trying to 55, 62s, and 66s. They have about 200 acres. They're trying to get that approved. Again, this road is moved west. It's on the other side of the high tension lines now. So another reason we had the smaller lots along Peach Blow Road to have a good transition between the school and the commercial aspect of this. And on Peach Blow Road, and we're on the southern edge of the city. And this is their diagram with the roundabout, and as you can see, it's moved west of the high tension line easement. And this is our piece that we're proposing to you today. Jack Berkner's going to talk a little bit more about Winterbourne and the alignment and what we went through with Ohio Health and the homeowner here, what we've had to do to accommodate, and we've tried to work with him the best of our ability. We've provided a lot of buffering at his request. We were going to talk to him about purchasing and putting in lots in there, but we couldn't come to terms on it, so we kind of changed the plan back to the original plan where this is curved. Have a lot of buffering here. He has a lot of buffering as well. So the plan has changed quite a bit since we started this. So we've been every time and talked to a homeowner or Ohio Health or trying to get this configuration figured out. The way Stavroff put in signs and brought it in here, the roadway came in. So we had to deal with Ohio Health, and Jack was instrumental in really working that whole area out. And obviously staff is okay with the way this is, and it's changed quite a bit recently just because of different folks saying, hey, we have some concerns with this. So we believe this is a good end use right here. We're certainly open to any type of additional screening or buffering, he has a considerable amount of buffering here. We don't really have any houses over here, but we're certainly open to working with Mr. Gundling if anything that he's needed or requesting that's required of us to do. So kind of getting back to some of the, when we started this aspect and we talked to the builders and what they want and what they need, and we looked at the market and kind of found what is working and where the market is, and I want to try to touch on a little bit of different demographics, lot sizes. Did a little bit of research, and we have some articles I'd like to kind of briefly go over with you. I know the BIA was presenting in front of City Council probably about a month or two ago in regards to lot sizes, and trying to explain that, hey, maybe there needs to be a shift. We see a shift. There's a trend nationally for house sizes, square footages to be bigger and the lots to be smaller for whatever reason. I'm sure there's many. Some of the reasons that I've researched are, there's these step-down folks, they're empty nesters, their kids are in college, they're still working, they don't want to take care of the yard anymore, they want a smaller footprint. There's also a lot of millennials, single person, single member households that are purchasing houses. They don't want to rent, they want to have value in the property. They're purchasing houses like this as well. So just to kind of touch on this is State of the Nation's Housing 2018 Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University. So it's data-driven, it's unbiased. This is getting into some inventories, shrinking inventories of new homes. So 2013, 2015, 2007, you can see new houses are dropping. This is across the nation. If you read over here, it gets into, National Association of Realtors reports the number of homes in the market fell 1.65 million in 2016, 1.46 million in 2017. Single-family inventory alone shrank 11% from 1.45 million to 1.29 million. December 2017 for sale inventories were at their lowest level since 1999. So there's definitely a demand in our community, in the Columbus community, the Metro unit, Delaware community, the whole area. There's jobs being produced. For every job produced, you're supposed to have one new household produced, and right now it's less than half. So there definitely is a need. These are some demographics from the same article. 20s and 30 millennial generation forming new households in greater numbers. So down here at the same time, nearly 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every day. So these are getting into, we kind of have 4 different markets in the subdivision that we think that the builders have told us, hey, this is what we're going to try to hit. So you're going to have the step downs, you're going to have maybe millennials. Maybe millennials are 2 stories, they're going to be on 52s. So their staff requested 1,600 square foot for the ranches, 1,800 square foot for a 2-story on a 52 lot. We see that as 2 separate markets, kind of a millennial market, which is growing rapidly, and then also a step-down unit. So not necessarily a retired person, but somebody who has 2 kids in college and they want to reduce their mortgage, they don't want to do the yard work, they want to pay the college tuition. So there's 2 different types of markets we think for the 52-footers, as well as the builders do too. They're telling me this, so it's not just me. So and then the 65-footers are more towards folks, that just have the kids, the young kids. They want to maybe move up 1 step, and then we have the 80-footers for those are probably going to be 450 to 600. 65s are going to be maybe 375 to 425, and then the 52s are probably going to be any range from 300 to 375. So certainly not first-time home buyers in these products, that's for sure. This gets into millennial population. So 2011, 2016, projected 2021. As you can see, the green is increasing rapidly. So that market is becoming bigger, and these folks are going to want to buy houses. They're not getting married, they're not having kids, but they want to have some value in some property. This is getting into a little bit of the baby boomers. As you can see, 2016, 1990. you can see that they're becoming more prevalent. There are a lot more baby boomers here now as in the age groups 55 to 59, 60 to 64, 65 to 69. So that group is growing as well, trying to hit that market. This is Board of Governors Federal Reserve System. Again, just data driven. Exemplifies national trend. Larger houses built on smaller lots. Median size of single family residences built from 1980 to 2014 grew by 50%, 16 to 2,400 square feet. By contrast, during the same time, the median, now that's the middle, right? Same below, same above, median lot size shrank by over 20%, dwindling from 11.3 to 8,800 square feet. So these are, this is things, trends that are actually happening. And this is just a graph depicting that. So the dotted line are the lot sizes, and the blue line is the building square footage. So you can see the square footage is going up, the lot size is down about 8,500. It's another article, median lot size, new single-family detached homes sold. You can see as you get up to 2016, about 8,500. So there's a downward trend. There was a little spike 06 to 08, but you can see there certainly is a downward trend. Just another article, National Association of Home Builders found median size of lots on which new homes built in 2017 reached a record low 8,560 square feet. Just articles, this is another one, 2019 construction trends. This is a little bit about millennials. Millennials make up 34% of American home buyers in 2017, a greater percentage than any other age group, according to the National Association of Home Realtors. So, this is a different picture. So, in summary, and Jack's going to come up and Todd's going to present, you know, we're adding Winterbourne Drive at a cost of, with all the landscaping and bike paths, it's about $2.2 million. The development is going to put that in and take that cost on. We're adding to Stavroff, Belmont Place, a secondary access through Ohio Health, which we had to work out with Ohio Health. That took 2 years. We have an access, which was always been there, and they always needed that secondary access or third access. We have that accomplished. We've created the roundabout. And to someone's question earlier about improvements on Peachblow Road, the county is going to require us to widen our side of the road. There's about 600 feet on either side of the roundabout that will be widened anyways, just because the way that it's designed. So it should take up most of our frontage, and if there's any additional, there's about a 2-foot bump. They said we would have to go to Gundling's property and stop there, and we wouldn't have to do the 120 feet on the west side of Gundling, and then all the way to our eastern property line. That's what the county has said to us, but our understanding is that roundabout will take care of that, because that will have to widen it up at that site. So we're doing a lot for the area. We believe in the products. We believe in the size of the lots. You know, so we're thankful to be in front of you. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm gonna throw it to Jack here, and he's gonna kind of go over some of the challenges we've been through.
I've got a quick question. The slides that you presented regarding the development to the south, metro development,
Yes.
and you talked about where the connection to the roundabout was going to occur, and it's now shifted west. How old are those slides? Is that something that's happened recently, or has it been a while now?
Probably within the last month and a half.
Okay.
That we met with Jack and Mike Love, John Pacine with the county, Rob Riley was in the meeting, and city, Matt Weber was there, Kerry Fortman was there, and we had a meeting with them to try to figure out where this alignment was. They were telling us the whole time that essentially whoever gets their preliminary development plan done first will set the alignment. So, you know, somebody's going to waste some money, right? So they had their alignment down here, we had ours up here, and the county and the city were saying, well, who's ever first, you're gonna set the alignment. I said, well, wait a minute, how much money are we gonna waste? Can't we figure this out in advance? Jack actually was kind of the proponent of that, and he said, let's sit down with these folks and see if we can get this worked out. So it was just recently that was decided.
So is this drawing we have correct?
Not the illustrative plan, but the next one, that drawing is correct, yes.
That's got the right roundabout.
It's in the right place.
Okay.
Can you just talk about quickly if you're, making sure, since we're at a preliminary, having discussions with staff on a couple of the points, commission made already, the buffering. You mentioned you were willing to talk with staff on buffering on the southwest property there. To Mr. Halter's point about the tot lot being so close or pushed up against one of the basins of some sort of protection or barrier, but just willing to talk with staff about it. But my biggest concern still is going to be sitting on those two lots that are within the high tension easement. I'm not saying you need to eliminate them. I'm just saying if you're willing to discuss with staff about those two. I'm not comfortable having those in there just from a preliminary perspective, but just, if we have to separate basins for high tension, to me it would seem like we would also want to not have any type of lots touching inside the high tension easement as well.
I think it's important to remember with regard to the high tension area, it's 150-foot.
I get that, Mike. I really get that.
However, the lines are in the dead center.
Yes, I
So
get that.
they're not going to be close to the lot line, and certainly not close to the building location within each lot.
I get that. I mean, the lots are probably 130 feet deep or something like that. I mean, you're still, even if you're still cutting in there with the easement. So to me, it's still about the easement part. I get that the lines are not, directly overhead or anything like that. But that's my most uncomfortable at this point right now. As well as, your engineers talk about that southwest basin. I'm not usually comfortable about seeing basins up against property, some other property line, not yours, type of thing. Is there really a need for that, or could that basin be shifted?
Jack Brickner with Planned Communities, 110 Northwoods Boulevard. Thank you. On the basin, basically each property has to stand on its own. The Belmont Basin was not designed or can take this property here. The location of the basins has to stay within the drainage area of the property. So we can't take that water and put it into a different drainage basin area. So that needs, that basin there is picking up the water from that drainage area of the project. And that ended up by being the best location for it between the access that Ohio Health has coming off of Peach Blow in the lot owner to the east. That ended up by being a properly sizing for that. We are also, from the discharge of that basin as well as the one to the north, we have coordinated getting easements from the Belmont developer as well as from Ohio Health for the necessary pipelines and discharge points from those basins through their properties.
Okay.
If I can just mention on the easement from AEP, we spoke to AEP, and the reason there was not allowed to be water underneath the high tension lines and there had to be ground there was so if there were any problems with their lines, they would be able to get equipment in there and work on it. That's why they didn't want the water there. Now we talked to them pretty extensively, Jack did as well. So that's why there's that dirt area in between the two ponds.
I would also mention that on all electrical easements, for a high-tension line in that I have dealt with in my nearly 40 years of practice, all of them have an absolute no build under,
Yes.
under that area. You can't build anything in the form of a structure of any kind.
Along the western edge of the property, there's something called Future Row. I can't really see it on mine, but it's a
Future private road.
future public row.
Yes. Public right of way. That's it.
What that is that follows up the property, there's an 80-foot strip of panhandles often referred to, that Ohio Health owns, coming off of Peach Blow all the way to the back end of the larger piece of property.
Oh, yeah,
off of
yeah.
Ohio Health Boulevard. So, one of the difficulties in dealing with Ohio Health, other than, say, the bureaucracy of that firm, is they really don't like to do anything with the property that they don't know 100% of what's going on with it. And that was part of the difficulty we had with them talking about this section. They were extremely conservative about wanting to commit to anything. One of the things that they wanted to very clearly note to yourselves as future residents, as well as the future residents within our project, that may end up by being a future road. It may not be anything, but they just wanted us to start indicating that on our plan, that might be a possibility of a future road. The section that became part of our plan from Ensign heading north and into one of our roads here, that's going to be designed and meet standards as if for it to be a public road. Whether that extends down to Peach Blow, extends north up to their property, that's going to be up to Ohio Health at some other point, but it's all being designed. This will be a public road connecting the two projects, and it's being designed for extending north and south and being shown that that'd be totally up to Ohio Health.
And just to note, Commissioners, Ohio Health zoning and preliminary plan, they've only affected on building on site to this point, but they're, unfortunately,
Yeah,
I'll
don't
throw
get me
that in for
started.
there. But their plan does show a potential access point down there, and that plan predates certainly Gunling's and the Belmont plan as we know it today. It was just what we'd call a flag lot, and that was the way to get into that farm field before Glen Road was even there. That, what Jack just described, is not inconsistent with what their approvals were. And I can confirm that Ohio Health has been very clear with us as a city. They don't know. They still don't know whether or not they're going to do a driveway or a road, or if they're going to do development back there or not, which makes all the rest of us trying to plan and coordinate and make sure that subdivisions have connectivity difficult.
And would the first section would need to include the access, but would need to include the access road over to Ohio Health, correct?
That's where the utility connection is.
Okay.
Yeah, the utilities for the water and the sanitary come from Belmont through that point there. They stop out of Ensign currently, so that would be picking up with that. One of the difficult areas to work around this project was that end of it coming off of Ensign Drive, and trying to figure out how that was going to tie into the property. And worked with staff quite a bit on that, came up with a bunch of different options. It was starting with Ensign Drive and the property owner to the east, and right now Ensign Drive is pointing towards that property. So we're going to look at how we're going to bring it up north. And so there's lots of discussions, lots of, for 2 years almost, between Ohio Health, with Ohio Health, as well as the property owner to the east. We had a bunch of different layouts for that road. Going directly east and then looping north required a lot of variances from the city standards, from radiuses, from intersections, where this would be a T intersection here, coming down and turning to that would require variances. There are a lot of variances that would be required from the city standards. And so there wasn't a whole lot of comfort level with that, as to whether that was going to be a a safe radius turn and intersection at that point. So while we were looking at that option, we were basically brainstorming a lot of other options to how this can be resolved, and again, working with Ohio Health and between all these things. So we came up with the idea of basically what we call the Z, coming off of Benson onto Ohio Health, north through Ohio Health, and then into our project. And again, we're creating an interim section in here that could be connected by Ohio Health to the north and the south. But this Z ended up by being something that ended up by being supported by staff, the staff engineering group. We worked with them on this, and that's what we've incorporated into the plan. The other items wanted to mention about the zoning text, there's a question brought up about the utilities. There is a general utility plan that is part of the zoning text, basically showing how the stormwater, sanitary, and the water would be flowing through our project, connecting into the other nearby projects. And that would have to be developed into a preliminary plan, engineering plan down the road, and into the final engineering plans. But there is a general utility plan that showed in the application that's before you. The other item that I wanted to just touch on was the extension of Winterbourne. We had worked with Todd and his group after they had done the tree locations. A couple critical things we looked at doing was saving the trees in this tree row here. I think Lance had mentioned in his summary, and also a group of trees down in this area. So we had looked at Winterbourne coming down here and came up with this location unto itself and then we had the meetings with Metro, had the meetings with the county, had the meetings with the city. And what had come out of that driving this location is the county at some point will be looking for an underpass for beach flow underneath the railroad tracks. And so what they set was a minimum standard from the railroad tracks to the west of 2,200 feet. They did not want to have any intersection that they would have to relocate later to meet that 2,200 foot standard. The original one that Metro had barely met the 2,200 feet, but it put their location of the road heading north right underneath the pilot. In the county, or the city, were very excited about the roundabout being underneath there, but that being an intersection and possibly having a traffic light. So we had met with Metro, met with the city, met with the county, and moved the entrance of the location of the roundabout to the east side, the west side of those power lines. So that brought it into this point here. One of the things that there was a question brought up about contributions that would need improvements would need to be made with the roundabout or Peach Blow Road. There's a MOU, a memorandum of understanding, dealing with a traffic study for the Winterberg property, as well as it's probably going to incorporate the Metro property to the south. That the guidelines for that MOU have been established by the city and the county. That has been presented to both those agencies for their sign off. And as soon as that's signed off, then we'll be releasing the traffic engineer to do that study. Coming out of that study is going to be traffic counts. Traffic counts for Metro, traffic counts for Winterbrook, and existing traffic flows and future traffic flows on peak flow. Those traffic flows are going to define what contributions the developers need to make to that roundabout that's eventually going to be built by the county. The design of that roundabout is also going to be coordinated with the city. That was a commitment that the county had made that worked with the city design standards for the roundabout. But a contribution towards the roundabout is going to have to be made by the developer. At this point, the county's estimating that's going to be around $400,000. The typical roundabouts are costing a little over $1 million. Is what the county's saying. The typical they typically see in this situation would be about $400,000 of contribution from the Winterberg project to that roundabout. So it's not in addition to the Winterbourne, some final agreements with Ohio Health and stuff, so there is a lot of commitments being made with the development of this property. So those are the items I wanted to hit on, address any specific questions to those at this point.
On the Winterbourne, one of the cases earlier, we had Winterbourne with some calming measures. Has there been discussions with this developer for calming measures on the southern portion?
I believe
On
that
this- on their
I believe
section of
there's
it.
been some preliminary discussions that,
Yeah.
but final details on what we end up doing with Glen Ross could inform what we do here to try to match that calming measure.
Okay.
And however that happens would probably be a condition in the final development plan
Okay.
for these phases.
Yeah, Todd wants to kind of, Todd Ferris wants to kind of go over the layout of the development. He designed it, kind of, if you have any questions for him, he can answer those for you at this time. And wanna review that, or?
Hi, Todd Ferris, the Ferris Planning and Design. I'll rephrase that. Bob wants me to go over this. They've really touched on pretty much everything in a roundabout way. But I think from my standpoint as a planner, just the way that I've looked at this family farm, first we look at what's out here, the natural resources. And it's pretty much what it is, a farm field, but we do have a real strong tree row that runs here. This is where the existing house is. They've planted a lot of trees around that just for shade during when that farmstead was built. We have strong tree rows around the sides and along the north here. Now, there's a strong tree row here, but they sold this portion off to Ohio Health at some point in time. So we don't get the benefit of that tree row, but Valmont does at this point in time. So but what we did then is specifically look, first thing was Winterbourne. How do we keep that from destroying that tree row? It's just pointed right down the middle of that property line where that tree row is. And the numbers that Lance threw out about the amounts of trees that would be taken out, most of those are right here, this section, right here. The biggest tree on site is literally right on this portion of property right there. So it's got to come out because that's where we've got to connect. And we brought it over as soon as we could to preserve that tree row because that obviously adds a lot of maturity to this project. I think it's a beautiful backdrop for a roadway. It's a lot better than just going through a farm field with some mounds and little teeny trees. We got maturity on day one, which I think brings a lot of value to that. The same is true with the roundabout area. I don't know, you get these roundabouts and again, they're in a farm field. It just doesn't feel right until everything starts growing up. This has a heck of a nice backdrop right now, and it's just gonna feel beautiful. The ones like Sawmill and Hyatt's or whatever, where they're in the trees already. It's just a nice feel, and this is really what we try to do with that. So we've organized around those things. Now we've got this feature on this corner. We can't ignore it. It's there. It's that power line. We worked with that. We tried to get open space that was congregated around the homes or whatever, but AEP in their infinite wisdom says no, you can't. We have to get to our lines, even though we know that we can drive around ponds, but they held fast on this. So what we wanted to do with that open space, just not unusable, is to celebrate it. And one of the things that I like to do, this is me personally, I like to go to Michigan in the wintertime and go snowmobiling. And they use those power lines like crazy. They are recreational paths for everybody. For snowmobiles during the winter, in the summertime, they're for ATVs or you name it. And we don't do a whole lot of that in Ohio that I see, but I've been doing a lot of planning work over in the Concord Township, and there's a lot of power lines there. We've got, let's say, about 1,000 acres put together with different developers, and there is an extensive bike path system that's going to be utilizing all these power lines, so you can literally walk from Sawmill Parkway to South Section Line Road, which is several miles. And with this one, if it keeps on continuing that way, this metro development here, I'm got the fortunate task of working on this one as well. That will be able to take you all the way down through this. The Hooks have a piece of property that's south there. It's condominiums. It's called Greenery, where there's a pathway there. You could walk from here to that speedway down on the corner by Shanahan, down on that corner from this. So this is the beginning of what I'm trying to see is a regional pathway that's paid for by developers, which is nice. But so the power lines, we'd like to use those. I mean, they're not. I know there's a power line above them, but they're are green spaced. So again, as everybody said, there's a line down the middle, but we like to celebrate them. We brought in the field areas. We want to plant ornamental grasses and different types of prairie grasses in there, so there's some texture and feel as well as the mowed areas. So it becomes a feature, not just something that everybody overlooks. The activity areas, again, we've located kind of based on what we think the demographics would call for. We've got a top lot area, seating area here. We see that really catering more towards the 65-foot lots and the 52s. But again, it's an area that everybody can meet and congregate there. Here we've tailored more towards the adult population, given the fact that we're closer towards what we think is going to be less children. This top lot, which there's some concern about the pond, again, we've located here because we see this as serving this area with more children. Now this is separated from the pond by almost 200 feet, where we have that top lot, and I understand the concern, and I don't think that's a bad idea, that maybe there's some fencing that runs in here to define that field. But we don't have it right next to that pond. It's closer towards the single-family lots. Because we took that into consideration, because everywhere there's a pond or a power line, where do you put them? And then the suggestion of putting a top lot here, I think it makes some sense if it's a small one, but that we're so close to one that's a larger, that I don't know why we would duplicate it in those two areas being so close together, but we'd certainly take a look at that. As far as identity, this will look very similar to Stavros with the mounting and the trees. We've actually emulated that with our landscaping here. Winterbourne is going to look just like it is coming down here. We've again taken that landscape cue in their zoning text and put that in here. It's significant landscaping, by the way, which is good for you, but it will be beautiful on day one. We've meandered the pathway and out of mounds. If you saw that section, we've got mounds on both sides, so you just don't feel like you're on the roadway or on the house lot. You're kind of back and forth, so you get different experiences throughout. We want to celebrate this when you come in. We have those entry features that set up like column lights, which again, we just wanted to start playing on some of the themes that you've already established. You have your signage themes that you have with the limestone columns and things like that you already have around. So we picked up on those themes and we're going to celebrate that there. At each of the entries, we're going to have 2 columns with a little light cap on top of it as well. That I don't know if it says any more than just the initials or what, but there's a theme that we put together with this that will carry it through, so you'll know that you're in this section of the property. All these open spaces will be owned and maintained by the HOA. They will do that. Each basin will have aeration. I'm sorry, I almost turned it up. But they will all have aeration, so they will be, that's fine. So they'll be kept nice. They have to be. I mean, you're buying a heck of a house here. So we want to do that as well. Do you want to turn on that one section? Now, the one thing I want to talk about briefly, and
what are you looking for?
The one of the buffer areas.
Okay.
The one we have throughout this process, I'm being very cognizant of this house. It's a beautiful house, a beautiful piece of property. This is the government property. And we've taken pictures of around it, what's here, so we know what we're dealing with and how we're going to keep their privacy intact and how we're dealing with that. As you see, that they've done a heck of a job with their pond, and it's one heck of an oasis. It's a great place to be, I'm sure. But they've got a significant tree row around all sides of it right now, which is good. They have significant mounting in the back. You can just see all these different little views here. What you see of that, and it looks like those trees are probably about 15 years old, I'm guessing, but they're fairly mature. My point is, we know they need buffering. We propose buffering. We have shown some mounting. What I don't want to get into, and this is just me personally, is right now there's a letter from a landscape architect that represents them, and there's comments in the staff report that suggest that, or not suggest, mandate that we do a mound with trees on it. I don't have a problem with buffering, but I don't want to make it that we have to do a mound, because a couple things can happen with that. These trees are right on the property line. if I come in and mound on these things and ruin their, root systems, I could kill all of his trees doing that. So he's lost his buffer with me putting in my buffer. I would like to make this, the buffer less prescriptive and more, do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't want to have to commit to a mound that might kill something. I would like to pass that down until we get to a final engineering stage to make sure that drainage works with mounding and everything else before we just say we have to have a mound with these trees. The trees are easy. I can plant those flat, I can plant them on a mound, but the mound is what scares me. And I don't want to have to commit to that today if we don't have to. Does that make sense? Just from that standpoint. I think there's good places for it, but to do it all the way around. You know, everything else you've heard from us, I believe, I've been plotting to wrap up with some of these things. But again, any questions, just let me know.
I think that's our presentation. If you have any questions, we can answer those now.
Not much of a question, but more of a comment. I can see you guys have worked really hard on putting what you presented to us this evening. The mix of the lot sizes obviously is going to help in marketing and selling those properties, because you show that today and going forward, we not only have a deficit of number of new homes that's required, but there's also a change in the size. But my problem with what you presented is that noodle-looking basin to the west. I mean, there's got to be some other way to engineer a basin that can accommodate and achieve the requirements of what you're trying to accomplish, than to just, to me, it looks like it was just a, let's just throw it in there and let's, you know, hopefully make it fly. So hoping someone could convince me that that noodle-looking basin is needs to be there, and no other alternative is possible.
I can address that for you real quickly, and then I'll let Brian and then kind of address it as well. Let me get back to the main. So there's a trib area, okay? It kind of runs down here, right? And then there's a trib area that runs, and they both go south. So this trib area comes here. All this stormwater runs through Stavrock and down Havens Ditch. They had put in through the property to the south of Stavrock on the other side of Beachblow Road. So we have a easement from Ohio Health that we put into effect. There's a 50-foot easement here that ties this storm drain into their storm system. There's also a 50-foot easement back here that's part of our deal with Ohio Health, along with a 300-foot easement here for roadway. So this trib area, all the water from this area has to go to, let's see here, through Stavroff's system. And we actually paid Stavroff $6,500 to oversize their pipe from 2 to 3 feet, 24 to a 36-inch pipe, to accept this storm drain. So I don't know how we're going to, this water kind of collects here, and Brian will be a lot better about speaking this than I am, but so this water down here has to go south, connects here, goes into Stavroff through their 50-foot easement that we have from Ohio Health. That's part of the deal that we have with Ohio Health. So that's why we need 2 basins. Catch this, all the water goes this way. So I don't know if you can add anything to that or not, Brian, but.
Forward, state your name and address, please.
Brian Burkhardt with Civil Environmental Consultants, 250 Old Wilson Bridge Road.
Rivington, Ohio 43085. So the reason why, part of the reason why the two basins are needed is with the Ohio Health Road, with that being a flag lot, if that road ever got put in, that water would need to go somewhere. So part of the negotiations with Ohio Health was we would pick up their water, so the entire way up. So if whenever that is fully designed, going south and north, it would tie into both of those basins. Just with the limited space that we had in that southwest corner, it is paralleling the road. It's just kind of a lack for space, and it is following the drainage shed. That's just, it is where it is, unfortunately.
It's a pond.
It's a pond.
You're in the country, it looks good, it's a nice pond.
Your other ponds look great. I'm just saying that one is just
This
strange.
is 120 feet, that strip. So it's not a small,
I know.
if you go out there and if you look at these pictures, it's a pretty big space. I don't know if I have any good pictures of that area or not.
Sure, absolutely.
So I just want to show you here, I have a drainage map that was submitted here. So this pond is literally only it's basically for the Ohio Health Road, and then it was just the back of just these few lots here. So it's really not taking our development, it is almost entirely the Ohio Health Road or potential future road, and it's designed to account this being fully designed, not just our piece. So we're kind of being proactive here with.
Do you know if this was part of our packet? I don't remember seeing this.
I think it was part of the submission to us,
Okay.
staff. We don't normally put in the
Okay.
drainage basins for you. Certainly see all that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep, thank you.
So this number 10 here is a view this way. So that's number 10. So this is the western side of the property owner here, and then this is Ohio Health. So you can see it's a pretty expansive area. It's difficult to get a full appreciation of it in that picture, but you can see Peach Blow Road, and there's a couple houses on up. But it's a pretty wide area.
And we can always address that with landscaping and things like that too, just so it's not a linear pond in the grass.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, members of Commission, Todd's earlier point, I think they are showing mounding and landscaping pretty significantly on the east side of the Gunlings property between there and the lots, and it kind of widens out as you get near the house. We're comfortable with that in a landscaping plan as staff. We don't think that's going to necessarily impact his tree row. We certainly wouldn't want it to on that side of his property, but we assume they put that together knowing that they're not going to impact his tree row. It's kind of a layered mound and landscaping approach, which is a good approach. Then on the north, obviously, it's a little bit tighter, but you're on the north side of the Gunling property, on the back side of these home lots. So we're getting the mound and landscaping in, at least at this level, that we think we can. Nobody's done final engineering and utilities yet, so we're just not there yet. And then I think the letter from Mr. Elliott, and my suggestion earlier was perhaps from, I don't know what we're calling the east-west road here that ties into Ensign's eventually, but there is room really on the west side of that skinny pond, not so skinny apparently, to do some landscaping. And Mr. Gunling has a pretty good row of trees right there, and then I'm sure they can leave enough room between Ohio Health's property and the pond to do some additional landscaping too, which may help additionally buffer some of the lots of Belmont as well. I mean, buffering kind of works both ways. So that was our suggestion. You couldn't get really a mound on that west side. And the other thing to consider is that if more buffering is desired by Mr. Gunling, that a pond and open space is a tool we use in the city for buffering, as the commission is well aware. But it could be enhanced with some additional plantings along that area.
I hate, I don't like to be the negative person of the group, okay? I'm trying to figure out, not only with this, but many others that are coming into the city to be annexed. What's in it for the city? What do we get? We get more streets to take care of that we can't take care of now. All right? I don't believe the income tax the people pay in here will actually pay for the services. We keep on going, we're gonna need more trash pickup, we're gonna need more police, we're gonna need more. I've often wondered, what do we get in return? What do the citizens that live here today? Are they gonna have to help pay for some of the repairs of the roads, of the sidewalks, of the bike paths, of all this stuff? Is it gonna pay for itself? I've already been told it won't. So, it's a nice layout, it's a nice development, but is it gonna cost the rest of us money in the long run? And is it fair to ask the existing citizens of Delaware that we should annex more property? I just wonder. I've wondered about it for 40 years, and I'm still wondering about it. I've never had anybody give me an answer as to what's in it, what is in it for the city, the citizens of Delaware here today.
It's a good point, Commissioner. We talk about this a lot with annexations and development in the community. I can tell you that communities generally, particularly in Ohio, that aren't growing do have all of those same issues that you just laid out in terms of service provision with the declining tax base and the declining amount of residents. I worked in one. I lived in one. Actually a few. And that's a much more undesirable condition than ours. In general, and the mayor can tell you, the finances now coming out of the recession with the city are generally in pretty good shape. There is obviously a road discussion that we've been having as a community for quite some time now and will continue to have. A couple of things that are in it for the city, as to use your words, the connection of Winterbourne we see has been on our thoroughfare plan and is an important transportation connection for existing citizens in the community and the communities of Glen Ross to be able to circulate this area. Go to the schools, go to the new high school, go to the proposed elementary school, etc., and even get out to US 23. So that's one major piece of infrastructure that obviously the developer would pay for, but would be a public street, and the city would have to maintain thereafter, to your point. I think I know Mike has some information to share with you in that regard. A couple other points. They would be in the South New Community Authority, and so these residents would pay into that, which helps pay back the Glen Road extension that the city essentially fronted the money for. And they would also pay a per lot transportation fee consistent with the other developments in the area, which could go towards other transportation improvements in the area as well. So there's just a few of the things above and beyond what we normally, parkland and connectivity and bike paths being extended and those kind of things, which I do think have utility and are important to the overall planning of a community, one way or the other. We obviously don't control what happens south of Peach Bluff. I mean, the county and the township does, so that's just a condition we have to deal with.
Okay, but this is all predicated on the point that Grady or Ohio Health was going to build a hospital down there, that we spent that money, of which I may be wrong. I've been down there. I haven't seen the hospital. Okay, so this is all trying to make up for something that they came to the city and said, either you give us what we want or we're going to move the hospital into the county or move it someplace else. All right, so that's why I say I know that now we need these extensions and these connectors because nobody's fault, but we got bamboozled and now we got to pay for it. That's what I'm talking about. What's in it for the city? Probably been better off we told Grady, bye.
Well, as you know, Commissioner, we're talking about this with the 30-plus person comprehensive plan steering committee we're going through today. The mayor's on that, and others on this commission. And one of the questions is, do we want to grow? How do we want to grow? Where do we want to grow? Some of that certainly is emerging as a theme to try to help some infill development and some redevelopment sites within the community, but also recognizes that we've made a big infrastructure investment in water and sewer plants that aren't necessarily just related to the hospital moving there. Heck, the annexation development in this community started on the west side, 30 years ago. That had nothing to do with Grady Hospital. So, at least at that time, Grady Hospital in the southeast. So those are conditions that exist that we can certainly operate those plants at less than capacity, but the utility director will tell you that they're operating at less than capacity. And that has a eventual cost as well. So I think the planning's been good in Delaware, been progressive in many ways, particularly in Ohio, and has been about trying to manage the growth rather than reject it altogether or accept anything that comes before us. So from my perspective, this community's done the best job it can under the rules that Ohio gives us to play with, which are different than many other states and a lot less than many other states to localities, unfortunately. But we've kind of embraced that, and I think we continue to embrace that with the new comprehensive plan to really focus where we want development to occur in the future. The southeast area is definitely one of those areas that's emerging for all the reasons you just mentioned and all the reasons I mentioned. We have a significant utility and roadway investment in that area. I agree with you. It would be nice if the hospital had followed through on what they said. What can I tell you? I agree with you. And they may yet. We don't know that.
Don't hold your breath.
I did a cost analysis. I know this was brought up at the concept plan I actually emailed Matt Weber, and I did a cost analysis of roadways. So Matt came out with this. Matt and Bill Farino authored this back when there was a levy in the city of Delaware regarding pavement condition report. I think the levy failed, but this was essentially said the cost of the roads, etc. So I did a basic cost analysis of, and I'll bring this up here, and I have actually a handout for you as well. So this is this. I emailed Matt and I said, hey, there's some issues on city council as well about whether the development would pay for the roads. Why are we annexing if we can't pay for the roads that we currently have for annexing new roads? So he sent me this report. Bill Farino, Matt Weber, Anthony McCoy, Shane Harding were the authors of this. So this is a pavement treatment cost summary. So condition is very good. Cost per mile is $7,500. So the way that was explained to me, if you read through here, so when you have cracks or anything in new roads, they have to come in and they have to put the tar on there and seal them. So on average, for very good, which is a new roadway, preservation treatment is $7,500 a mile. Okay? And I have a cost analysis of this. So this is a very good road. This all comes from this. This is a good road, poor road, very poor. This needs reconstruction. This needs repaving. This is some information that Jack asked the county. We weren't able to get the numbers specifically. So these are numbers through an email of what it costs for snow removal in ice. It's about 30 cents a square yard. That's according to the county. The city didn't give us that information. So we're going to be adding 12,100 feet of road total. We had Brian draft this and figure out how much road we're going to have. So there's kind of two different types. There's an arterial road, and then there's residential. Now, according to this document, arterial roads take, we have 0.41 of a mile, and then the residential we have 99, that's 22, that's Winterborn. Then the rest is 9,900, 1.875, a total of 2.29. $7,500 a mile for road preservation. So annually, to have someone, for brand new roads, to have someone come out and, you know, fix the cracks and seals, $17,000. So now, according to this document, resurfacing on a road is about every 10 to 15 years. So if you preserve it, and you preserve it well enough with this, then on a main road, every 10 to 15 years, so I use 12 and a half. So what I did was I figured resurfacing on a 25-year cycle for the arterial road twice, and for the residential road once, and then I based that, divided by 25, came out with an annual number. So, high volume arterial roads, currently it's $375,000 to do a resurface, 12 and a half year resurface, 25-year cycle, 2 times 375, because you have to do it twice for 25 years, times 0.41, there's 0.41 of the arterial roads, $307,000. That's doing it twice over 25 years. Divide that by 25, annual cost $12,300. $12,300. You base it over 25 years, is how much you would have to put away to make sure these roads are resurfaced for 25 years for a cycle.
We don't even have the $17,000.
I'm not
To
done
be honest
yet.
with you.
I'm not done
No,
yet.
we don't have the $17,000. We've got other roads that are just the same shape.
Okay.
And they go down. I've been through this thing. I did it in 1999. We went through this whole thing. We went through how much it cost, the different conditions of the road. We went to every street in the city of Delaware. At that time, we needed $1 million a year. That was 19 years ago. I bet that thing's up now to over $2 or $3 million a year. We don't have the $17,000. I've had people tell me they want to get their alleys, and what they get back from the city is, we don't have the money. So, you know, I know what you're saying. You're going to say, well, we've got this and that. But in the long run, we'd have to take that $17,000 away from someplace else. We don't have the money. That's a period, that's a fact. The mayor's here. If I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong. You guys just did a budget. I'm telling you. Now, this will probably get annexed into the city. And I don't mean to dump this all on you, because this goes back a long ways before that thing. We have taken on stuff that we can't afford to fix. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And and like I say, I don't want to stop progress. I don't want to stop annexation. I don't want to stop building. I just keep thinking that if I was a businessman, if you were running the city of Delaware, and this was your business, and how you made money, you would have made a lot of changes. Now that, and that is the truth, okay? So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but understand that as a citizen of this town, I've been here since 1963, okay? And Delaware ended at Troy Road, okay? So this is really, it's grown, it's a good city, but I really get concerned that are we biting off more than we can chew? That's all I'm bringing up here. I'm not saying we should stop it, but we need to give some thought to where we're at. Mike was a mayor at one time, he went through it. And he's seen how the city has grown and how the finances, even though they continue, the expense of everything else grows. And roads right now are a big concern. Not only we get yours, they're brand new, but how many do we have that are 20 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old? Some of them have brick underneath them, okay? It's a real big problem. I'm just bringing it up. I'm trying to make us understand what's happening here and what we're doing. And I still believe in the long run, the existing citizens here are going to pay. All right? We need a street levy, which we do need, an income tax increase. Who's going to pay for that? All of us have been here all our lives. We've got to pay for that. May have had to pay for it anyways, eventually. But town was a lot smaller, would have been a lot less money. All right? I'm concerned about it, okay? Because this is in Old Tangy School District though, isn't it, Mike?
Yes, it is.
Okay, which is good, because a lot of the annexation we did before was in Delaware. So not only did we had to increase the city taxes, we had to increase the school taxes. You know, it just seems to keep on growing. I'm just bringing it up.
If I can just get down to this bottom number here. So 40,000 for resurfacing annually, 17,000 for preservation, maintenance about 30 cents a yard. There's 36,000 square yards. It's 10,000. You get about a total of 68,000 annually to take care of the roads that we're going to put in and pay for and annex into the that we're requesting to annex into the city. This is the income tax generated from the project. So the way we came up with this, actually Mike did the community impact assessment. So there's 263, we're proposing 263 households. To live in a $400,000 house, which is going to be the average price of all the homes in this development, you have to make about $130,000 a year. Income tax at 0.1875 times 130,000, which is your current income tax, times 263 is $581,000. 842. This is a little higher. Mike based this on 174 annual income per household in our development. I talked to them, they said it was about maybe 120, 130 on average. To get a loan for a $400,000 house, you have to make 130 grand a year. So 130 times 263, and I subtracted this number out. 130 times 263 times 0.087 or 1.875. There's a surplus of $581,000. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. I think that it will clearly pay for the roadways that are being put in place. You could use some of this surplus to fix some of the old roads, but I believe there is going to be a surplus from income taxes. Now, granted,
Yeah, if it was all going to roads, but it's got to pay for police and fire and street cleaning and all the other stuff that goes with it. And then if they work in Columbus, because I don't think there's a whole lot of jobs in Delaware that are going to pay $130,000 a year, we give them a 50% tax deduction.
if you cut that in half, it's still $250. So,
Well, according to that, we should have more money in the city coffers if we have any idea in the world what to do with it. Someone needs to find out where it's going.
I'll let Mike talk now.
I think that, you know, this has been an historical argument for a long time. And it's, we're not gonna resolve it tonight.
No.
The problem is that new development, for at least the last 20 years, has paid prices that no taxpayer in the city of Delaware has ever paid. Impact fees of about $2,100 per house. You go into the north end, you go to the west side, you go all to the first developments that we did in the city of Delaware, not one dime in impact fees. Not one dime in impact fees. So these new communities are paying the $3,000 or $3,500 for the sewer extension fee, the $1,000 for that, the millage that has to be paid for the road improvements on Glen Road Parkway. All that is stuff that nobody that has lived here for any time, and I've been here since '54, have paid. So it you know, you have to look at this thing on a global impact nature. I've always believed, I still believe to this day, you're either growing or you're dying. You go to any other community outside of Delaware, to our north, to our east, to our west, and you ask them, would they want to trade places with us? In a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. And the reason for that is because they see what we have. Now, there's problems, there's pain with everything. But an awful lot of the things, a lot of the roads that are really in really bad shape in Delaware are the state highways. And the state highways, you talk about an unfair system. To do Central Avenue, when Central Avenue runs into 37, from 37 outside the corporation limits, the townships and the county pay nothing. Every inch of roadway that is resurfaced in the city of Delaware on a state highway, we have to pay 10% of that. Why is that? So I think this has tremendous financial impact to us. And looking at just the raw numbers that Bob proposed, the housing prices, at that, we're gonna generate to this community about $99,950,000 in base valuation. That increases our ability to borrow money, to do other improvements, other capital improvements. All these, we're gonna generate just, just on your current pricing, before this project is built out, over $5,400,000 just in fees to the city. Just in fees to the city. We're gonna generate to the school district annually over $1,874,000 a year. That's based on current tax valuations, not when they increase. We get very little out of property taxes. That's just the way it's done. But the $842,000, that's another argument for this city, and maybe you're pushing it, Jim. Maybe it needs to take place now. Is how much longer can we afford to say we're going to set off taxes? If you want to live in Delaware, you got to pay for Delaware. If you want to work in Columbus, that's your business. We're not telling you where to work, but if you're coming here to live, there's a price. But that's a decision that you as the city council have to make, not me. And we've wrestled with this, and we've wrestled with it for a number of years. But I think that to say that this development will not pay for itself, I don't think that's true anymore. I think that we have added enough cost in the form of impact fees and surcharges and everything else. These people are paying their fair share. Now, down the road, 15, 20, 30 years, well, where will Delaware be there? You gotta understand, at least by our current rules, this is it.
This is it, no longer.
This is it. One of the other things that when you look at the thoroughfare master plan, just not for the city of Delaware, but Winterbourne Drive, why is it lined up this way? Because it's going to tie into North Street Extension. North Street Extension is going to go all the way to Powell Road. All the way to Powell Road. It's already being built in segments right now. So there's a lot of things happening here, and we're just starting to, I'm glad to see, starting to work together between county and city and townships about how this is going to impact the growth. But we're going to have, there's going to be a lot of traffic from people coming from the township into the city of Delaware to get over to the Senior Citizen Center and other places. We can't be afraid of growth. We just have to be wise about it, and we need to, council needs to guide us, and that will happen in due course. But I firmly believe that this is an asset. This, as all these other developments, are assets. We're bringing new people into our community. They're enriching our churches, our schools. You can't measure those kinds of benefits. But I really, really believe that I don't make these numbers up. And when you talk about 174,000 and you can have 130, well, that was under the old mechanism of gauging that. Now the banks have to take into account, well, what's your credit card? What are your credit card debts? What are your car payments? What are your taxes? And they factor all that in, so it's driving that number up on what you're going to be able to borrow and what you have to borrow money to buy a $340,000 house. So all these things are important, But, you know, again, all this is coming on the back, a lot of times, of the developer. You know, when we put these numbers together, and then I was told today that it's gone up to 2.2 million, just to do the connection for Ensign Drive is 315,000. To do Winterbourne Drive, just do the project, unload it, no driveways on it. You're asking Bob and his family to put that roadway in at 1.612 million. And all those people that are living in the Pulte are gonna come through it. It'll probably be vice versa. But then we're gonna add the county coming on it. And so we can't close ourselves off. We have to be up with our eyes open, and you're all asking great questions. Jim, I've known you a long time. You have damn good questions. The problem is that this is not the place, this is not the forum, but it needs to be talked about. And this community needs to face up to it. It needs to take on the responsibility of coming up with a comprehensive plan for taxation to deal with those kinds of issues. You can't always look to the developer to do this. The money's running out. The cost of building, the cost of, you know, everything is going up. You know, $175 a square foot. Basic construction now. You take a 2,000 square foot home, multiply it. That doesn't include the lot price. So I just think that, you know, Bob and his family took on this challenge, and it was important. It was important to them. I asked Bob, and I reminded him tonight, that when he came to my office the first time, I said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this?" And there were times I think he may have questioned himself, but it was hard. We had to deal with a lot of people, a lot of entities, and we've tried to address all the concerns. This would not be here tonight. This proposal would not be before you tonight if we did not meet the conditions. I think there are some excellent points made with regard to the fencing around the pond areas, particularly close to where the houses are and where children might go. But that's another decision you all have to make, and council ultimately has to pass. Are we going to take that on? Are we going to start doing that everywhere? So I think that as Todd pointed out, you know, we can buffer. We can buffer, but you got to be careful about how you buffer and how much buffer. And you know, it's just, we're evolving, and we're going to see more of it, and we're going to continue to feel the pressures of it. And I wish I had all the answers in the world, but I don't. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you.
And I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Anybody on staff have any questions?
No.
All right, this time I'd like to open it up to the public, listen to any comments or concerns that they may have. We've got a list.
I was gonna say, make sure if you got a sign-in sheet here, if you've had a chance to sign in, there's a sign-in sheet.
All right. Like this time to invite Steve Elliott. Thank you, sir. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Steve Elliott. I live at 6338 Buckman Street in Lewis Center. Been a resident of Delaware County for about 30 years. I'm an attorney, a real estate attorney, primarily with Baker and Hostetler in downtown Columbus. I'm losing my voice, even though I haven't been talking, just sitting back here all this time. I'm here representing John and Tony Gunley, who own the lot. Picture I think you saw earlier, which is part of the package, and you can see their 5-acre lot here pretty much sticks right into the middle of this development. And I'm not going to go through everything with all of you. We did submit a letter of objections, which I'm gonna go partly through. I'll try to be quick in the presentation. I also can't really address a lot of the numbers we've just looked at and how they really aren't gonna affect my client's property whatsoever. What we're trying to do here is, we're not trying to stop this development because we're sure it's probably gonna happen in some form or another and at some time. What we're trying to do is preserve the value of the Gunlings home and property as best we can. Kind of doing that two ways. One is some of the things that we've raised that relate specifically to the, generally to this development, not specifically to their property. If you look at the letter, I'll kind of follow that as a little bit of an outline. One of our big concerns was the access concerns that were raised in the staff report. First of all, I understand that the traffic study is being approved, but hasn't been done yet. And that, to me, seems to be a little bit out of order. Certainly with this number of lots being developed in this development, there's gonna be impact on the road, and we'd kind of like to know what that's gonna be, how it's gonna be dealt with in a little more detail than we have. If you look at the two access points that are brought up in the staff report, the primary access point is the roundabout, which makes sense. We've been told that there is no commitment on the property owners in the township to be a part of that roundabout construction, and there's been talk back and forth about it, but I don't think I've heard anything different about that tonight. If you look at the secondary access point from the Belmont development, which is the Z, I think somebody referred to it as, I heard there have been discussions with Ohio Health and commitments. I haven't seen any kind of documentation of any agreement by Ohio Health to let this developer or anybody else use a chunk of its land, the Panhandle it's been called, to basically enter it, to turn north for so many feet, I'm not sure how, and then turn east into this development. So to us, it seems there is not really a good assured access on either one of those points at this point in time. It also appears to us to be, the Z to be a little bit of an unusual and maybe dysfunctional means of access into a development this size. We're also concerned with the discussion that's just kind of come up to us lately that Panhandle strip, I think we called it, may actually become an access point, because that obviously raises other concerns for the Gunlings, who are 60 feet away from that, what could be a roadway. Coming into Peachblow Road right now, it's not shown as that, and that it just has the one drainage ditch in it. But it's becoming clear that Ohio Health at least wants to keep open their options to make that an access point down to Peachblow Road, which again raises the whole question of that pond and what the screening is around the pond. That side of the Gunlings property is the least currently screened, I think, from my recollection of it. I think their east side is more currently screened. We would have liked to have seen a little more information in terms of a drainage plan and a wetland study if those were done. If I've missed something, I apologize. If you flip over to the next page, the main item that relates to the Gunlings property is the buffering plan, the mounting buffering plan. And we did engage Edge Landscape Architects. We weren't able to get Eddie George to come here tonight, but his associate did give us a letter that we've attached, and we're certainly willing to consider and work with the developer and staff to come up with some type of a good screening, which we would think would include mounting plan, but I'm not a landscape architect, that would basically screen their house and from the property to the west. One of our concerns, which hasn't been discussed much here tonight, is the bike path, which if you look at the development plan, it basically stubs into both sides of the Gunlings property along Peachblow Road without any required, at least that I saw, signage or notice that you're about to come on the private property. People aren't going to stop and go home when they hit that. They're going to go across the Gunlings lawn or out on the Peachblow Road to ride around to the path where it connects on the other side of their property. That seems to us to be a bit of a problem. The pond itself, there's been a lot of good discussion about that tonight, but one of our concerns was they show it in a nice blue color. We've been told by some folks that that's going to be more or less a dry ditch that'll fill up when it rains, and by others that it'll be a pond, but there's no commitment for any kind of aerating or anything like that if it is a pond, to keep it from just being a eyesore more than anything else as far as the Gunlings property is concerned. Some of our other general comments are the lot size, the 52-foot lots. I give Bob and his team a lot of credit for the information they've brought forth, and I certainly can't argue that the market is one way or another about that, but I guess I look at a 52-foot lot with a 1,600 square foot home on it, and to me that seems like an entry-level home. And I think that's not something that the city has agreed to support in terms of the comprehensive development plan. We've also heard a lot about the homeowners association maintaining some of these improvements and deed restrictions, but I don't think those have been part of the materials to this point. So again, it's just something that's going to happen in the future without any kind of a real timeline on it. If you look at the map and where the Gunlings property is, the obvious conclusion to anybody is this should have been worked out between the two of them a long time ago. It's an important piece of the whole development, and it's obviously the Gunlings property they've lived on since 1995 when they bought this lot and built what looks like an old farmhouse on it. It's a beautiful home, a big barn, and probably something should have been done to sell it or to make some arrangement to make it all work out better for both sides, but that wasn't done. And I think both sides have attempted recently to do that. I think we've felt that a lot of the information in the last 6 weeks has been changing about a number of these different points. We've seen 4 different plans in that 6-week period, and it's been hard. It's Bob and his team's full-time job to do these things. The Gunlings both have jobs and have tried to keep up with this process, but I can tell you that things have changed very quickly in terms of some of the information we've gotten. So again, we're trying to preserve the aesthetic and economic value of the Gunlings home. They've lived there since 1995, have built a great family place to visit and live, obviously, and we're doing that by the specific restrictions or requirements that would relate to their lot, and also some of the general things that you all have been talking about here tonight, which I think are great comments. I'd be glad to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I'll keep my report short.
Thank you. Anyone on staff have any questions?
I don't.
Yeah, we can address everything
Yeah.
at the end.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the public? Please come forward. State your name and address for the record.
Yes, Charles Brophy, 204 McNamara Loop. I'm part of the Phase 1 Belmont Place. I'm one of the ones that backs up to what is the current catchment pond or basin, whatever the terminology is. And kind of my neighbors kind of elected me or forced me to come because we really don't understand what this really means, and just want to get a better understanding of the whole skinny pond that seems to be a very big piece of debate tonight. What the ROW, what the roadway looks like. Is that a roadway? There's a tree line in Belmont that is not extensive right now. Is it, number one, still going to be there? Number two, are we now talking about a major roadway being 50 feet from our backyards? So a lot of things kind of came up out of nowhere that no one seems to have answers for. I want to try to get some information as best I can to go back and tell them what I know.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Anyone else that would like to come forward? Please. State your name and address for the record.
My name is John Truitt. I'm at 252 McNamara Loop in Lewis Center. I also am one of the homeowners on the existing Belmont Place subdivision that was there, started being built a few years ago. My lot actually backs up to that Z connector. So I'm just a little bit north of where that noodle basin is, on that west side of where the development is. My area of concern is that where that tree line is, which I guess I understand is owned by Ohio Health. I didn't know that until today, but that little strip there. But apparently it's a skinny tree line. And it seems as though where that Z connector turns north and runs north-south, just that little strip, it seems like it possibly is cutting into that tree line. And I would just like to make a request, and would be happy to talk to either the developers present here today or the Ohio Health folks, but to add a buffer there that would allow us as homeowners to keep us from, basically seeing that line of road. And actually, my lot actually backs up to where the turn is to go east into the development. So I have a real concern that in the evening or at night, as cars are driving west, that the headlights would be shining right into my backyard, where I was very happy to build a home with a bunch of windows in the back. So I would like not to have headlights shining in. So, essentially would like to request some sort of significant buffer there to help prevent any sort of property value loss for the homes that are along that property line.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the public like to come forward? Any questions or comments that the staff would like to make regarding any of the issues that were brought up by the public? And if we need to, I'm sure you'd be welcome to, the applicant would be very welcome to come forward again.
Yeah, I think with regard to buffering, certainly Bob and his team there's room along the skinny pond, I think somebody called it, or whatever, along that green space to add some additional buffering. That would be on the east side of the road. I think, all right, the trees are all on the Ohio Health property. I think that was a question that came up. Belmont had done a good tree survey back when they started, and so they documented that all those trees were in Ohio Health's strip there. I think it's been our intention to, we're at preliminary, we're not at final engineering, but it's our intention to try to preserve that tree row as much as possible with this road. I think that Ohio Health strip is about 80 feet wide, if I recall from the survey. Now I'm losing my voice. I think it's jumping to me, Steve. And so our typical street section is 32 feet, back curb to back curb, 60 feet of right of way. I'm not sure the width of that tree row. There are a lot of ash trees that are dead in that tree row. That was documented in that tree, and you can see that when you're out there and things are starting to leaf out. So one of the things we could do is preserve that tree row as much as possible, knowing that there just happen to be quite a lot of ash trees in there. But it'll cycle through as sort of tree rows and forests do. And there'll be new trees in the future ostensibly. But the other thing we could do is perhaps work with the Belmont developer to maybe drop a few evergreen trees would be really on the Belmont side of it to help that enhance that buffering. This gentleman, I didn't get your name, I'm sorry. John Truitt, Mr. Truitt, that may help that as well. We can get a layer between that and maybe Bob, or perhaps Bob could work with the Belmont developer to do that. There seems to be enough room there to be able to accomplish all of this thing. I will tell you, as I remarked earlier, is that the Ohio Health Plan, which was really the first one of these three in the hopper, included a secondary access. Could be a private drive, could be a road. All private drives are built to city standards in the city of Delaware. It's private roads. Down this 16, 17, 1,800 feet of strip. So it would be secondary. Obviously, their main access point and their focus is off of Ohio Health Boulevard. And I haven't heard anything from the hospital that has changed that. They just literally don't know whether they're going to use that or not. Just this strip. They don't know. I can't get an answer to that. They can't get an answer to that. Ohio Health just didn't have an answer to that yet. But it was part of their plan. I think that's the answers I can give to the public comments, unless I miss something. If I miss something, let me know, and I'll try, but Mike probably has some answers as well.
Thanks, David.
The first item I want to go back to is that on Monday afternoon, after some email exchanges, Mr. Gurdon received a confirmation from Ohio Health that they are prepared to sign all documents. In fact, I have confirmation today that it was delivered to their office, and so he sent me an email and said, look, we'll get to it. I just don't know the availability of the Ohio Health people. That it's one gentleman has to be the signer of it, and there'll be two documents. One's an agreement, then there's a memorandum that's going to be filed, and the ultimate easement will not be between Mr. Gurdon and Grady. It will be between Grady and the city of Delaware. And that will not be probably executed until this makes through to the final development plan gets approved for at least phase 1. So that is, we have done everything. They have reviewed, we've exchanged numerous sets of documents back and forth with corrections and everything, and that is now, in my opinion, done. With regard to, we also, the easement with regard to gaining the access for the pond to the north up against Belmont, is that connection point with Glen Road Capital Group. That is an easement that has been filed, executed and filed. So that's done. One of the things that Ohio Health has also asked as a part of this agreement is that there may be a need for them to have a small decel lane, and that's part of the negotiations, along with their ability to use the skinny pond. And so those are just things that, it's a part of a give and take negotiation. It was a long process. It was just a long process. I would indicate with regard to the secondary access, this would have been a much better situation. Maybe if all of us would have had their eyes open when Ensign's Drive went in, that it would have been moved farther to the north and therefore wouldn't have created the problem of the jog. That was not the original plan. The original plan is that there were lengthy negotiations with Mr. Gunlin with regard to my client exchanging land and with him, and then it got much more demanding, and what was being demanded by Mr. Gunling for 0.067 acres. 0.067 acres. So that's why we're at the configuration that we have today. There were countless meetings. I think that in addition to that, with regard to whether there will be a road on Panhandle, I agree with David. We don't know what Ohio Health is going to do. They would not commit to us what their I don't think they know what their plans are for their property and whether or not they're ever going to build that hospital. They're just those are just things that have to be worked out. I will also indicate to you that there is a easement that exists for all county properties, and the Gurdon property is subject to it, on setbacks. And where they're concerned about that bicycle path, if the county is so chooses, they can extend that bicycle path through their right of way. I'm not saying they will, but they can. And all the matters with regard to Peach Blow Road are controlled by the county. And the reason for that is our annexation laws. We can only go up to the existing right-of-way line. We've had to broaden that right-of-way line as a part of this overall plan. And so those things that's gonna occur. There's gonna be, Bob's agreed to the widening. There's gonna be widening on the other side of the road. There's gonna be, depending on how big they end up deciding they want that roundabout, but it also has to taper back on the other side, back over to the railroad tracks. And that may not be tapered back because eventually Evans Farm is gonna build on the north and south side of that road. So, these are all things, and all this has been done, not without exhaustive meetings. I can think of at least 4 meetings that I attended, and I don't think I attended all the meetings. So there was a lot of discussion with Delaware County about what was going to be done in that area. So we just have to see that. Engineering studies, we have given you the preliminary information on drainage and on the engineering that we are required to do at this stage of the game. That's going to be much more exhaustive. You've just approved 3 tonight and final plans, and you know what the requirements are. So that will take place. The wetlands delineation, a phase 1 was done on this property. There was no requirement that I know of that requires wetland delineation. I don't know of any wetlands on this property. There's a statement made that there's inadequate mounting and buffering. We will meet what the code requires, and we will enhance in those areas that were addressed here tonight. If you want buffering along that pond, fine. But when Belmont went in, they're also required to buffer. So I don't know what buffering they did along their lot line. So those are questions that you can, and I think Dave alluded that there may have to be some dialogue with regard to that. So I think in the final analysis, we've addressed all these issues with you this evening. We have tried to be open and honest about all aspects of the Girton development, and we're in compliance. We have met the standard, and we would urge you to pass this evening. And you're going to see this again. You're going to see it on multiple occasions again, as the various phases work through. But this has been a 2-year process. I know very few developments that have taken quite that long, and not because of the city, just because of the negotiations and the extent of the negotiations that had to take place with neighbors. So.
And just to confirm, that southwest basin will actually be a retaining pond, right? That'll have aeration. It's not going to be a dry. It'll be a wet pond with aeration.
I don't think any of the properties, and I also want to point out.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that you could barely see it because there's some writing over it, but Mr. Gunling has a significant pond in his property with a rather large mound of dirt behind it.
And I think staff already mentioned you'll work on the bike path stubbing on both sides and have discussion about it.
Yeah, and just because maybe I'm getting tired this evening, but Steve, if your client would, I just think it would be good planning, and it would be nice if the bike path could connect from Belmont all the way across and not have a gap. And I think that's something your client is worried about, having the gap and then people just continue to go. So I would ask if maybe you and your client and Bob could work to maybe just connect that gap, and maybe there's a fence or something, I don't know, between the bike path and the property that makes your client feel more protected in that regard to the issues that you brought up. But we do have gaps in our sidewalk system and our bike paths. The first guy that put in a sidewalk had a gap on every side of it. And so that's just, as we have a bird in the hand developer, we get the sidewalks and the bike paths put in. And one of the things we're struggling with on the second generation of our citywide bike path plan now is to try to work to close those gaps. It's obviously a lot more expensive to close each individual gap than to try to do one trail system. And that is an amenity that obviously the Gunlings could avail themselves of too. These are open to the public. So I guess that it would be nice if you guys could kind of work that out, but we don't have any ability to require that. And certainly if there's some signage or other things that could be done at the end of the bike path, or maybe even a barricade of some kind at the end of the path, that seems like no big deal to me. I mean, we can make Bob do that with his development. I don't think he'll have any problem doing that if it comes to it. Just a comment on the bike.
Yeah. Thank you.
Could I comment? Are we still, I'm not sure of the process here. I don't want to jump out of line.
I don't have it.
I'm fine, yeah. Please step.
If I could, first of all, I meant to say in the beginning of my presentation a few minutes ago that John and Tony Gunling would be here tonight, except they had a trip out of the country planned for several months and weren't able to change it, so they weren't able to be here. I know they'd like to have been able to present their side of it a little more personally. I take a little bit of offense from folks putting blame on John Gunling for being difficult to work with and causing a delay in any kind of agreement. I think both parties worked in good faith to try to resolve something. As I said before, from my perspective, that whole effort came up a little late in the process. If I could comment quickly on what Mike said about the Ohio Health, what I heard as a real estate lawyer is there's nothing signed at this point, and they don't have to do anything with that property. Again, the secondary access means through that Z of property comes right, it's got to go right down the middle of their 80-foot panhandle strip, and they haven't agreed to that. So you're approving a plan that the secondary means of access, even if the first one gets resolved, the secondary one may never be there. You've already said tonight that they've backed out of a lot of things they may have committed to in the past. I don't see a legal ability to use that strip in terms of this developer making that connection. And the sum of it to me, and sitting here and listening to it, is that whole southwest portion of this plan is kind of a cluster. And I would just say again that I think approving it in this format at this point is kind of a premature venture. I think they ought to work out some of these issues before getting this approved. Thank you, and I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you.
If I may, can I address some of the transportation
Please do.
engineering
The
related
traffic,
things,
yeah.
if you don't mind? I'm trying to do it quickly. Plus, I want to stab at the noodle pond. So, with regards to the pond, I'll just say this: that strip, I believe, is 120 feet. Is that right, Brian? I tried to do a rough scale. And we do have requirements for the dimensions of a pond that you alluded to being too slender. What we typically require would be a minimum bottom width of 12 feet. Either that's 12 or 13. Because yes, if you do get too narrow, there's issues with stagnant water and just aesthetics. It doesn't look good. But with sort of a typical retention pond depth, I just did some quick calcs here with standard side slopes and that 12-foot minimum width. You're looking at a very maximum width of that pond would be 80 feet, which leaves an additional 40 feet extra on that strip. So I think from a sense of scale, and it might not be quite that wide because it doesn't necessarily need to be that deep, but from a sense of scale and width versus length, I don't have any concerns. There's actually a little bit of benefit to having a longer pond from a water quality standpoint. You get more sediment that settles out in Ohio EPA likes that if you have a longer pond from where the water comes in to where it goes out. So I'm not concerned from an aesthetic standpoint and functionality of the pond, especially with aeration. Secondly, related to the pond and discussion about buffer, something that we'll need to consider with relation to both topics is that we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot and require too much mounding such that the pond has to get skinnier, and then we really would have some of those issues with having too slender of a pond. So, you know, for example, a 6-foot high mound with appropriate side slopes and a little bit of a top would, 4-to-1 side slopes would be 24 feet each side, times both sides 48 feet, plus a few feet on top, you're talking 50 feet. So then you've required that pond to get any skinnier. So that needs to sort of be considered as we move to final development plan. And to address some of the issues about transportation related to easements and the connection to end signs, the arrangement that is shown here for that secondary connection to Belmont is what we have worked with them to come up with. It is sort of unique. It wouldn't be as unique or strange looking if that Ohio Health Road were there someday, but as it stands, it does maybe look a little unique, but it is much preferable to us compared to a substandard curve coming through there with a real tight radius to get to match up there. And then regarding the timing of the traffic study and final easement agreements with Ohio Health to allow that connection, from an engineering standpoint, just so you know, it's not necessarily out of the ordinary that at this stage preliminary development plan that we would not have an approved traffic study or approved easements and so forth filed. Obviously, if something were to happen between now and final development plan where that road could not be built for whatever reason, that would change things, and perhaps we'd have to look at an alternative and even redo a preliminary development plan. But it's just, I want everybody to know that from my standpoint, it's not out of the ordinary that all those boxes are not checked at the preliminary development plan. And as you know, per typical city process, with the final development plan, the first engineering submittal has to be made and reviewed, not even approved. So they're a ways off from some of those details really getting buttoned down. And I'm not concerned about the traffic study because the county and ourselves have been working on that, and they have a really good grasp on that. And as they alluded to, the traffic study will not necessarily determine the need for an intersection, because we know there's an intersection that needs to be there and it needs to line up with the areas to the south. But what it'll do is determine the impacts of development of the Winterbrook development and township county developments to the south, and how much they have to cost share and so forth. So all that stuff, I believe from my standpoint, is being taken care of adequately at this time.
And Jonathan, just to build on your point, maybe for the members of the public here, maybe Steve, you as well. Jonathan said it, but just to say it again, so maybe it's clear, is that I agree with what he said. If the traffic study and/or a final agreement with Ohio Health couldn't, for example, be procured by Bob and his team, it would no doubt change. You'd have to figure out another alternative for access, and that would necessitate him at a minimum amending the preliminary development plan. That's in front of Planning Commission and will be in front of council at some point as well. So there are those checks along the way for that sort of thing. We have good reason to understand that this is on track to be worked out. Again, if it's not, then the preliminary plan would have to be amended. And what other advantage to us of going with this zoning vehicle of a planned mixed-use overlay, which is kind of our version of a planned development, you might have heard that term, that's sort of an older term, is that we have more zoning controls for design and to tie the plan to the zoning as well, rather than it just being what we would call base zoning, which they have rights once they're annexed and to subdivide. So this is a stronger vehicle for us to ensure that what they're showing on the plan and then in the zoning text actually gets constructed on the ground. Bob could sell to somebody else tomorrow, and so we want to be left with the tightest controls on the plan and the text that we can have as a community, so the next guy who buys it is subject to these requirements as well. So I just want to explain that.
Jonathan, thanks a lot for that. Really appreciate that. It's, and Dave, your explanation and support of what Jonathan said, at least to me, means that, I don't know about other members on the commission, but I'm willing to go forward on this and put it before commission to see if they are prepared to make a decision. What's the wish of the commission? Okay.
And in particular, the zoning and the conditional use, but the preliminary development plan is just that, it's preliminary, subject to change and subject to review and approval at that time or disapproval, whatever that would be, so I don't have a problem with that.
I'll make a motion to approve 2019-0640 rezoning amendment with staff recommendations.
Second. You got it.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve 2019-0641 conditional use permit.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve 2019-0642 preliminary development plan with all staff recommendations.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Badger?
Yes.
Mr. Halter?
Yes.
Mr. Prahl?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Mansour?
Yes. Congratulations.
This will come before council May 13th. We most likely will not do a presentation that night. You hear me?
We'll do the presentation at the public hearing,
Thank you.
which will be in June.
The first meeting of
In June, because there's only one meeting in May because of the Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
So public hearing will be in June.
Does somebody have that date? It's the second Monday in June,
10th, I think?
just because there's some public hearings, Hold on. June 10th?
So,
June 10th is when the public hearing presentation would be before city council. There will be a first reading, which will set that date at this next council meeting, but there's, in my opinion, you're welcome to attend, but in my opinion, literally, you don't need to, that'll just read it and set that public hearing for June. Just to maybe spare you a 10 o'clock night.
10.
Could we get some clarification on what the additional and revised staff recommendations are going to be? I think we've had a number of them mentioned here tonight, and I was trying to take notes, but that would be really helpful to know what those were.
I don't think we had any revisions to our recommendations.
Any additions? I heard the one about the mounting around the pond. I thought I heard one on the bike path.
Yeah, I think there are conditions that the commission did not include extra conditions like that. We did discuss it, and I think my expectation would be that the developer goes back with your client in particular and works on some of those issues as we go, assuming that council approves these elements as we get into final development plans as well. Council also could add those conditions during that process. So we got a month here, give or take, and there's some buffering that we talked about to the Belmont as well, or the buffering serves really your client and them in some respects. Over the course of the next month, if you all could work together to address some of those additional items, that would be helpful from my perspective. But they're nodding their heads, so I think they'll probably be contacting you to do that, is what I'm assuming. I'll let Mike answer, I guess.
No, I think that's correct.
That's my understanding.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
All right, moving on. David, I know you're losing your voice, so if you
I have
can
a very
share with us.
lengthy presentation tonight, Mr. Chairman. I need to go over land use categories from comprehensive plan.
See ya.
I'm just kidding. I have no other comments given the lateness of the hour. Lance, did you want to mention what might be coming in?
Yeah, right now we have two cases coming in front of us. Higher Wesleyan is going to propose some student housing, and Springer Woods, Section 3 of preliminary development plan for the remainder of that. We saw that 4 or 5 years ago. They're gonna put a new plan together.
Very good. Move on to commission member comments. Begin with you, sir.
I'm done.
Madam Mayor? Commissioner?
Quick one for Jonathan. I know it's not in the city, but Curve Road, from Glen, if you're at Glen Road, working west, there's that railroad
trestle.
overpass. Could you call the county or have Matt or somebody say, there's trucks hitting that thing, you know? I was on it just 2 days ago, and it was a semi, or not a semi, but one of those construction trucks.
Really?
And he whacked it pretty good, that's for sure.
I didn't hear, I'm sorry.
Is this the underpass
The
by
under-
our
The railroad,
closed
just
Yes.
landfill?
Yes, by the
Yeah.
closed landfill, yeah.
landfill, yeah.
Huh.
It's like 11'6" at one point.
It's
Yeah.
pretty- it's
I mean,
pretty-
it wouldn't take a very
Oh,
tall.
he was-
Yeah, I'll mention it.
Yeah, or,
I'll mention
you know,
it.
maybe the Matt, or, you know, call him or something, just,
Over height detection signs?
you know,
Yeah.
it's not a can opener since it's not for us, but, you know, semi never. But, yeah, there was nice little pieces kind of falling off, and,
I've seen it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Falling off of the truck, the bridge one, right?
No, the bridge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just, you know,
Little concrete.
Yeah, a little
Scoured
concrete.
concrete.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably take a look at that.
I will.
Yeah. Come from this, you know, don't come from the Glen side, come from the other side, 'cause I think they're probably going into that one development there.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Ravines.
The
whose it is.
ravines of Valentine.
And we could,
Yeah.
at a minimum, you know, we could communicate to the builders out there.
Yeah.
Just be aware to not take that way.
Well, after hitting it once or twice, you certainly get know about it, wouldn't you?
Think the word would get around, wouldn't you?
That's all I had.
Commissioner?
Yeah, nothing.
And I have nothing, and we are adjourned at 10:06 in the PM. Thank you.
We're starting at 6:30.
God, we started at 6:30.